going past.
Goes around. Alison, does that come through?
Absolutely
What
gorgeous.
side? She's in.
Bethwaite was 3.54 and she's gone up to 3.97. But you notice it quick. Really? Yeah.
So, jacket, I didn't.
You seem to be getting some. Second one we have it in.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, or it's gone to the bottom of the
On the
bag.
speaker.
or something.
Environment. Well, hang on top for this.
It's just us tonight, isn't it?
I don't know, I just made it. It's been
After
a.
9 years, we've just sold out.
There's no one dialing in.
We held on to the.
A couple of our friends said, oh, she go down to like Compton. No way.
We did. I just
I think it's maybe it's a little loud because
I'm all right.
sorry.
No, it doesn't be the one doing it. No,
I just turned this.
as I said, I'll support whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Part of the thing
Mouse, which is unfortunate.
is that perhaps we could just.
Good. Because we're thinking of disposal, what we're looking at.
Weird.
The
Birch.
birch.
Yeah.
It is a set of myself. It's really. Yeah. That's not just you. Also, cheap shot. That was a low blow, man. A low blow. Well, you laid it out there for me. What am I trying to do? I don't know if you
Yeah,
get
I'm all in favour.
dissipate, as they say. Okay, councillors, staff, members of the gallery, welcome to council meeting for Tuesday, the 25th of August, 2020. And in doing so, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And also read you the council pledge. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Please be seated. Just to remind everybody here, we are recording the meeting. It does go up online fairly soon after, just as a reminder. On leave, we have nil. Apologies, we have Councillor Harris and Councillor Nguyen. And no other apologies that I'm aware of. Everyone else is present and accounted for. Do we have any declaration by members of a conflict of interest in any matter tonight? Councillor Pitts.
I have for a 10.3.
And your interest is just for the sake of the minutes?
I have 2 properties in that street.
2 properties. Is it adjacent to the property being considered? Is it next?
Yes.
Yeah. So I might put that because owning properties in a street is not necessarily a reason, but owning them right next door might be a better way to record it, I think, Minutes Secretary. We can. Owns properties adjacent.
Steve, I'd still like to speak if I could. Yeah. If so, I won't have a
We'll
conflict.
get the conflict recorded first. See, I might need you to think about that. Yeah. Adjacent to the property that is the subject of the recommendation. And that councillor's asked if he can speak to that item.
I'm sensing from the director that that's not appropriate. Director?
Too close?
Yes,
Could be interpreted as pecuniary.
and a perceived conflict.
Yeah. So our recommendation would be that you don't.
Well, I'll withdraw it.
So, yes, but in these strange circumstances around conflicts of interest, you can choose to do what you want. We can just advise you. So
Sure.
I'll let you think about that.
I'll withdraw the conflict.
Right, brilliant. That makes it easy. Thank you. We'll move on. If there's no other conflicts of interest to be declared.
Sorry, can I just check? Did you say you withdraw the conflict or
Yes. I'll withdraw the conflict because I'd like to speak to it.
That's what I thought you said. Sorry, I don't think you can withdraw a conflict. That's why I just thought I'd check, just to save you.
Yeah, I think my advice, council, would be that you're much wiser declaring the conflict.
Should.
And then can I talk to it or not?
No.
I can't.
You need to.
CEO?
It's a perceived conflict.
The can is yes. The question is not about the can. The question is about whether we would advise you, if you asked for our advice, whether we advise you to or not. That's the dilemma. I'm the CEO.
I wonder, having declared the conflict, whether you can say, subject to the conflict, your comments are as follows. So council can take into account that you could have a perceived conflict and they'll take your comments within that conflict.
Sure. Okay.
So,
Is that reasonable?
And then participate in the decision or not?
Not in the decision, no.
Okay.
Just,
Yes, I can talk to
Just
it, but
like
not.
the comments,
But
you
I can't vote.
you won't vote, yeah.
Okay.
So you'll stay in here, but you
Okay.
won't
I can talk to it, but not
stay,
vote.
but not vote.
We've got to be careful because we can't prescribe what you do, but equally you shouldn't be so compromised to the point that you have less rights than anyone else from the community who wants to have a say about something. So we say, councillor, you have to leave, but you could come and speak as a deputy. Well, that'd be pretty silly, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, CEO, for helping us work through that. Any other conflicts of interest? And thank you, Councillor Ripp, for pointing that out. Confirmation of minutes. Somebody happy to confirm that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of council on the 28th of July be taken and read and confirmed as a true record.
So moved.
Councillor Barnett had her hand up first, but as the loudest, do you wish to speak? As the loudest, you happy to second?
I am happy to second.
Wish to speak to it?
I do not.
Any further debate? Being none, I'll put that motion to you. All those in favour? Against? I'll just take that again. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Public question time is with us. There are several rules about public question time, which we have displayed out there in the gallery. And we have one question that's been provided to us, but fortunately we have Ms. Marilyn Kingston here to be able to read the question out. So just invite Ms. Kingston to come forward. We'll read the question and then I will read the answer provided by staff.
Okay, thanks.
Just for the purposes of the minutes, could you state your name and address?
Marilyn Kingston. I live at 55 Boyle Street, Prospect, 5082.
Thank you. Fire away.
Okay. Do I have to stick absolutely to the question that I sent?
We have an answer prepared to the question that you provided in writing, but I don't believe we can restrict you to that question.
Okay.
Look, I'm sure we'll provide the same answer.
So I'm sorry, that's a bit of an about. Like, so
Absolutely.
if you ask a question outside of the answer I've been given, we may have to seek additional information for you.
Sure. No, it all pertains to the question. Anyway, so, and you can stop me if I'm getting outside of that, obviously.
It's question time, not debate time.
Okay, so my question is, when the Vine Street Plaza redevelopment was designed, why did it not incorporate a play area for young children, preschool children in particular? It is an ideal site or hub for families, which has the library, shopping, cafes, commonly frequented by parents, grandparents, after-school drop-off and pick-up, and would complete a family-friendly area that would definitely be utilised. I believe it would be better than little ones playing on the light features, steps and seats, or sitting in cafes playing on parents' mobile phones. It would add value to the area as being family inclusive. The West Ward and Central Business Area are sadly lacking in areas where young children can be accommodated and have opportunities to play and develop their gross motor skills, while parents, carers, grandparents can conveniently meet, have a coffee, watch over their children, meet others, connect with others where their children can do the same thing. And maybe then the children will be better able to manage their exuberance in the library, relax and enjoy the books and a story. The business area has an abundance of parent-friendly locations, but not many places suitable for people with young children, especially since Komodo removed the parent-children area at the back that was really very useful, frequently used. I'd like to back up my concerns because, as you're all aware, and I think been immense changes and they're continuing in terms of apartment blocks. There's one just being built next door to us, and these are going to be areas where children are not going to have places where they can use their motor skills. Developmental concerns are going to be an issue. Many children don't cope very well with libraries. Behavioural young children need a place where they can expend energy. So if you can give them a play, take them to the library, they're more likely to sit and engage. Or it can be used as, if you behave yourself, sit quietly, we'll have a play afterwards. I think it would really be good in terms of postnatal depression, connection for young mothers. Also for older people, which are a lot more of now, caring for their grandchildren, needing a place where they can do their bit of shopping and where the children can actually spend some time. I think I know we've got other areas, but for young children and for mothers and carers, grandparents, so forth, I believe that this would be an absolute asset.
Thank you. We have got a time limit to questions.
I'll stop
so,
now because
yeah,
I could rave on forever. But
Well, that's kind of our job sometimes, but anyway, even we have limits. So I'll read you the answer provided. It's acknowledged that the Vine Street Plaza is a prominent community space within the Prospect Road Village Heart, providing opportunities related to developing a strong community place, improving connectivity to adjacent attractions and creating a vibrant destination for all. The design principles developed for the project include maintaining a flexible space suitable for all users, creating a sense of place while integrating with the village heart, ensuring visibility or connection to Baindi and the Town Hall, and providing opportunity to activate the Town Hall basement and adjacent properties. A dedicated structured playground has not been included in the design for the space, as this would impact on the desired flexibility of the plaza, although there are elements such as a raised stage area that lend themselves to exploration and imaginative play, while an increase in overall open area will provide greater opportunity for children to create spaces for their own play. We'll also be investigating the reinstatement of the much-loved piano and the ping pong table to the plaza as play elements. Council's premier playground for children, the Memorial Gardens play space, is located just 450 metres east of the Vine Street Plaza, and the nearby Barker Gardens also offer a convenient location for caregivers to meet in an area where children are able to explore and play. Works will also soon commence on a playground at Charles Kane Pando Yurta Reserve on Churchill Road, which will provide an additional play space for younger children in the West Ward. That's the answer that has been provided, that will be published in the minutes. Any further questions?
Yes, just my concern is that there's not a lot in the immediate hub, and just in terms of the areas that I've noticed in Europe, especially the old Italian towns and also in various other places, it's really an important aspect of family gathering. And although there are play areas, I think on the western side we have very limited, and particularly since the schools have been fenced off, which I'm also concerned about, and there's no access anymore outside of school hours, holidays and weekends to the play area at Prospect Primary School, which used to be such a convenient place for children and families. So there's a paucity of places like that in this western ward, and I just think the convenience, and we've all utilised these cafes, and we've all seen what happens to young children in cafes. It's not good. It's not good when parents pass them their mobile phone and they're not talking and interacting with them. Mobile phones are not good for their development, cognitive, their attention, as well as their physical development. So that's behind my push to have something that would be really better utilised for people in terms of the convenience of, just having that hub in the business area.
I think point well made. I'll take that as a comment, not a question. So if you haven't got any further questions, I thank you for coming in your question, and the answer will be published, and keep interacting with elected members as you wish. And I'll now see if there's any other questions in the gallery.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, in the gallery. Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Oh, no, I forgot to listen to the last two words of your sentence, the gallery.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting if you wish, but we actually don't have anything on that matter in the agenda tonight, but you're more than welcome to stay or go as you see fit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the public gallery? Yes, if you'd like to come forward, Mr. Stanton. And for the purposes of the minutes, if you could state your name and address.
Mark Standen, 7 Mawson Street, Nailsworth, and I will sit. I like the spacing. My question is with regards to grants for public works. Once Prospect Council, City of Prospect has applied for a grant and actually been successful in that grant, what obligation is in place for them to actually go through with the grant and use the money? Is there facility for them to say, look, actually what we needed it for, we don't need it for, and not go through with the grant?
I'll take the question. CEO, reallocation of grant funds.
Well, it really depends on the terms and conditions of the grant, but it's highly unlikely we could redirect a grant that has clear terms and conditions to be spent on a particular project.
I was thinking not redirect, but return, or just not use it.
I think the simple answer is that when another level of government gives you money and you send it back, there's a clear message in that, and it's not to our favour.
I get it. Yep.
Whether there's some nuancing around whether the grant can be applied slightly differently to the original application, there might be some room around that, but that's a factor of degree, isn't it?
Well, it depends on what the arrangement is under the agreement. Yeah.
Okay.
And they all differ, of course, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Do you have any further questions?
no, I have no more questions.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from the gallery? There being none, thank you. We'll move on to petitions. There are nil petitions before us today. Deputations. I'd like to ask if there is a Mark Standen in the gallery, if you'd like to come forward. A lot like that last bloke.
Good looking fellow, wasn't he? I'm going to get the thingy off.
You have a presentation. I think it's ready to go.
Thank you.
For the purposes of the minutes, I have to ask if you could state your name and address again.
I've changed it. No, I haven't. Mark Standen, 7 Mawson Street, Nailsworth.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk about the proposal of works at Prospect Gardens, Nunawerra. And for those who are new to area, new to the council, I'll just give you a little bit of a brief history of what we've been doing there for the last 4 years. So at one point they had someone say we need it fenced off. So whoever was in charge said, well, we'll grab that hunk of fence over there and we'll bring this around here. Without really talking to anybody, they put a fence right across the middle of the park. So at that point we're thinking, yeah, hang on, there's not a lot of, it's not good. They then went, all right, well, let's put some wood posts in because that's a bit fancy and that'll do what people want to do, but you can't see through the jolly things. Kids and dogs get through them and they're rotting slowly. So then they had a community survey which kind of got forgotten, and 4 years later we are where we are now, which is that we found some money from the government and within council, and we've got some current works in the process that has gone out to consultation, which is why I'm here tonight. So Prospect Gardens is quite unique, I believe, as a picnic park in the Prospect area. It's got some unique features which aren't shared with any other parks. It's multi-use, so it's got soccer field, baton club, the picnic park, the courts and the car park. It's fully fenced, which not a lot of other parks are, especially picnic parks. It's got 2 barbecues. I think there's another, I don't know, has Memorial Gardens got barbecues? I don't know. Helens Park. It's got a sheltered picnic area, and within that it's got wheelchair access, so you can run a wheelchair. So it is quite unique in this area that it has all those things. It does have needs and it does have issues. The play space is absolutely disgraceful. It was rubbish when my kids were young. this little roller thing here, I don't know how many sets of teeth. I reckon the local dentist has made a fortune out of teeth that have gone on that. There's no way for toddlers to climb up except for that little chain there. It really does need replacement. The tennis court surface has started to deteriorate. That's at the basketball end, and it's all started to lift. And you can see, you're going to change. Let's go. Thank you. You can see it started to pull water. That's of a colour. So it's starting to pull water. We've got a one-way soccer field. You can kick the ball this way. If you kick the ball that way, you'll either lose it into the neighbours or hit a car. So when they do soccer practice there, they just do it one way. The petanque fencing is, let's go. Yes, the petanque fencing is needing replacement, as was the tennis court one, but they've replaced that. The other problem is that a lot of the maintenance is outsourced. And so a lot of these trees, if they hit them with a whippersnapper and kill them, a year later, a lot of this stuff still hasn't been replaced. So the maintenance, the outsourced part of it, the depot do a fantastic job, but the outsourced part of it is really needing. So we're moving on. Yes. The current proposal that's up at the moment is not good. It's the one thing that you're going to lose. You're going to lose so much grass, all this grass right through here, down through here. That's just disgraceful. This here. So I reckon you're going to lose about 40% of the grass, but it could be more because that little mud map isn't too good. And it's too cluttered. There's too many things. It's a tiny little park, and just to smash it full of all this equipment and all these little activities, I think that's correct because there's no other design than that. And it's really hard to figure out what's going on there. Once again, we're duplicating facilities that exist in other parks, and I'll go on to that in a minute.
One more minute, Mr. Standard.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll power on. So ignores all the other areas. Look, it's a park, not a playground. Around the place, you've got nature play at Ratley, you've got Flying Fox at Peppermint Gums, and you've got whatever that was in the other one. Look, we need to learn the lessons from Ratley. People hated the new Ratley, and you just have to look to Facebook, and you will see what they thought about Ratley. That's what it's going to look like. The money doesn't stack up. Ratley was 75K. We're looking to spend 430. I don't know how we're going to do that. Reduce the budget, spread the works, digitally connect it. Let's go, Mr. Machine, please.
Need to move for an extension of time.
That'd be good if you could. I've only got another couple of slides, so it's not going to be long, I promise.
Yeah.
I am having issues with it moving it on. Here we go. So we're at the end. My feedback is, look, replace the equipment, certainly, but use the locations that you've got. Like, let's not kill all the grass. Slash the spend. That was my question before. Do we have to have all that money? We probably really only need to spend about 150. If you spend 150, you'd actually be about $70,000 ahead, and you wouldn't have to take the grant. I think that's probably where it's going to park it. I'll leave it there for you.
Thank you. And please, if you could take your seat, Mr. Standard, there might be some questions from
that there
for you. Thank you for your presentation. That's obviously a fair bit of work put into that.
All right. Shall I sit here? Shall I wait here if you've got questions?
Yes, please. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah. Are there any questions from elected members?
Scallywags, come on.
A question and a comment.
Rebecca, otherwise not known as a scallywag. Thank you, Mr. Standard.
So thank you for the presentation, and I think certainly having visual presentations is really important. Certainly I was aware of some of that feedback about Ratley, and I think drawing attention to some of the things that are going on there as far as replacing things. So are there things that are being replaced that we don't need to replace, or pulling up that we don't need to pull up, like the grass areas that are being used?
Yeah, my
Question, yes.
Yeah, I can answer that question. My anecdotal evidence of people I've spoke to, I'm in the park every day. I speak to everyone I can. The anecdotal evidence is keep the grass, change the play equipment. The play equipment is long past its due by date, but people like the layout. They like, it seems to be a nice balance of the way it is, of what's there. And this, I think from what I'm getting from people, and this is not only my opinion, what's being proposed seems to upset the balance of the park. A park which is unique, and everything else that is going to go in there is duplicated. We talked about your Vine Street question that you had before, about kids' play space. There was mention of Memorial Gardens being the premier park and only 450 metres away. The same thing exists at Nganuwira. There are other things that are duplicated that are only about 200 and 400 metres away. So we don't have to do the same thing there that we're doing everyone else. It can be a unique, grassed, fenced picnic park with some play facility.
Thank you. Further questions? Deputy Mayor.
Are we allowed to ask questions of other people apart from the deputy?
No.
Okay, well.
Sorry, you're not in this section. You can ask other questions without notice and other means, but
okay,
specifically just address the deputy.
I might know the answer.
Well, what's my question then? Okay. Okay, here's the question. So, what do you think? So we're partway through a consultation process, and in technology space, there's a methodology called A/B testing, where a couple of options are put forward to test the waters on one outcome or another outcome to get a sense of what people might prefer, as opposed to putting forward one outcome, so a web page, for example. So what do you think the outcome of the public consultation process might have been if we had adopted that approach and put forward two quite different solutions and tested the public's interest in this model that we've seen or this model?
It's an interesting question. It kind of predisposes that the public outcome isn't going to come out favourably on this particular proposal, and it may do, because people with kids may actually respond more than people with dogs or people who like grass. And so it's interesting. I don't know how the public consultation process is going to come out. It may go in favour of the park, because the whole of Nailsworth Primary have banded together and said we want nature play. I think options would have been nice. I think options would have been helpful, and I also believe that something that was a little bit. I had a lady say to me in the park, and they had the corflutes up with it on there. She go, and I was explaining to her what was on the corflute. She said, "Is that this park?" And I said, "Yes, this is what they're doing. This park." She said, "I didn't realise that was for this park, because it doesn't look like this park." Because she didn't understand the mud map that was there. I don't know. The consultation process has been done the way it is. We can't change that. You certainly can't do it again, because people get sick of it. Maybe different options would have been a nicer process, but we can't go back to that now, unfortunately.
Can I ask, what you referred to a previous consultation process? What do you recall the outcomes of that were?
It was I read the report, and it's actually in the report from the last General Council meeting, and it was along the lines of people want somewhere nice. It was quite ambiguous. It wasn't as defined, but it didn't come out with anything specific. It was something, we want somewhere nice to be, or it was very vague from memory, but it's in the last council meeting.
Any further questions to the deputy? Councillor Barnett and then group.
Yes. Given that we're still in the consultation process, so this is, I guess, part and parcel of it, could be viewed as that. But I think So, are you aware that council is part of the? We've got a hierarchy of like playgrounds and parks and play areas. So, for example, Memorial Gardens would be a much higher and more a wider area, wider than district than a local playground area. So I guess we're.
What's the question, councillor?
So just, are you aware of that and how that might affect some?
I do remember from my time on council, we went through and did a park audit, and that park audit program put a different hierarchy to different parks. To my mind, that what we're doing might actually, it seems like we're changing the category of the park, whereas the consultation is for a play space. And I've always seen that it's called, Prospect Gardens. It's always been a garden. And I think if that is the case, then we might be changing the category of the park from a park to a play space, which probably doesn't sit well with that hierarchy. I don't know. I don't know. I think. Councillor Crick.
Thank you. My question kind of almost backs onto what you've just said. So I'm just interested in your concept around this being a picnic park and it's turning into a play space. And you would have heard the question earlier around we don't have enough. We're here in a consultation process where we're talking about where the library's going to go. People complained about walking 250 metres across the road to here. So I'm just trying to understand a bit more around why you don't think having more play equipment or nature play is a good thing. I'm just trying to understand that logic.
Yeah, and I'm probably hanging on. Maybe I haven't been as clear. I don't believe that we should get rid of all those elements. I think probably the balance in what's being presented is not correct. I mean, there's 3 distinct areas on the in the park. You've got that swing spot, you've got the playground spot, and you've got that rickety old flying fox thing. Either one of those could be. There's 3 quite distinct areas. You could turn one of those into a nature play area, probably the rickety old thing that no one plays on. So it could possibly be. You could get some of those elements in there, but it's about finding the balance, and without getting rid of the beauty that is that park. If all that parks look the same, if they all look the same, what's the point? And I can remember from my time when I was looking after the kids, I was a home dad for quite a while. You'd go to different parks. I don't know whether you've go to different parks, like you jump in the car and you go to the helicopter park, or you'd go to Marshmallow Park, or you'd go to Peppermint Grove. You'd do a different park a day, and you'd put the kids in, probably, if you couldn't just walk there, you'd put the kids in the car and go there and meet other mums. So I don't think families are adverse to driving to parks. It's nice if they walk. But I think if different parks have different attractions, it makes them more likely to be used. If it's exactly the same as Ratley, why would you go to one or the other? It'd be nice if it was different. And it is different.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yes.
Councillor Ripp.
It would be my understanding, and Mayor and CEO can pull me up if I'm incorrect, that generally with most grants, both state and federal, once it's sort of put in, I think you can change like elements of it, but I would assume that the bulk of it would be locked in. So let's just say we're in a situation where the consultation comes out, however it does. We've got our locked in money. The state's got its locked in money. Let's say we've got to spend our commitment and they've got to spend theirs. What would your thoughts be on what you could do to make the area more like what you're wanting it to be, but with the extra money?
Excellent question, and one I've thought about quite a fair bit, because it looks like you are locked into it. It's nice to have money, I guess. And we've always, in that area, we've struggled for money, and now we've got riches. The bucket's overflowing a little bit, so we've got to work that. Maybe we've got to get a bigger bucket. Certainly, the tennis courts could do with a resurface. That is due. It's not frivolous. The entire area is Prospect Gardens, so I'm sure that you could actually go back to the grant people and say, look, it was for this, but this is actually the name of the whole park. So the tennis court surface, the lighting is pretty bad, so that's going to chew up. The soccer field, you could do something with that, put maybe a low-lying fence so they don't kick the balls everywhere, and some soccer nets. There's other fences. The perimeter fence of the actual park itself, that hasn't been changed in 30 years. If this is if this is once in a generation program, do the fence, do all the elements that you want to do, keep them in place. Maybe move the barbecue over to the other side, so you've got the 2 barbecues are separate, so you can have 2 groups. That's going to chew up $50,000 in capital works, just laying electricity and putting lights in. Maybe if you're going to move that, put another shelter over there. People love the shelters. It's the only shelter that you're walking your dog, you go there. We talked a lot in council about digital connectivity.
the digital bins, the little height, the counters, the things that count people as they're going in. You could make that. You could certainly that would gobble up $100,000, I'm sure. So you could make that a digital park. You could have connectivity. You could have Wi-Fi there. You could spend if you put the money across the whole square instead of just one area and trying to jam a whole lot of things in there. I think you could spend the money quite legitimately and quite responsibly, and you'd have something you could be proud of without actually losing the integrity of what's there.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions for the Deputy? If not, thank you, Mr. Standen, for your deputation and your answers.
And thank you for your questions. I really appreciated the questions, guys.
And just remind you that the consultation is open at the moment. It closes on the 4th of September, and no doubt you'll be putting something in writing in response.
Yeah, and I think Jazz is going to put my PowerPoint display up for the elected members to access if need be.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you.
And you're equally willing, if you wish to stay for the rest of the meeting, or if you didn't want to stay for the remaining items, we wouldn't take any umbrage at you leaving early.
Thank you, and I thank you for your
Thank you for your time tonight.
Will do. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. Moving on from deputations to questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Barnett and then Deputy Mayor.
Yes, following our public question time, I'm just wondering with regards to Vine Street Plaza, would it be possible to put some like small little PlayStation, or there's quite a lot of ones that could particularly for like smaller or younger children, I mean. So that was my question.
I think the simple answer is yes, but. So anything that's got a falling risk needs soft fall, and that's going to muck up the flexibility. But I'm not sure, CEO, whether
look, Councillor Barnett, absolutely. Once the Vine Plaza's in place, we've already had people lobbying about maybe having some little fairy houses put in so that mum can have a coffee while the kids go and count the fairy houses. Through you, Chair.
Fairy house, CEO.
Fairy house is a little house, Chair, where fairies live.
Little fairies.
Fairies.
Small fairies, thank you.
Known in parts of Scandinavia, apparently.
That's discriminatory to me.
But in all seriousness, Councillor, through you, Chair, there is a lot of things like that that can be easily put in once the foundational, obviously the infrastructure is put in place. I should make the point that this doesn't always stop things like that being put in, but as the Chair's pointed out, we have to make sure they're safe and they're usable. But that was one suggestion that's come to us.
Yes, I should preface by saying safe PlayStations that don't need ground force.
Yes, yes. We had a little discussion around it today, and discussion around reinstating the snakes and ladders game. And one of the people I was speaking to said no. I said, well, why not? Just because it's new doesn't mean you can't put paint on it. So I think, I think one of the drivers is this flexible space option. But what you do on top of that, of course, is flexible by the nature of the space. So that's a great idea, and there might be others. Councillor Green. No, sorry, Deputy Mayor. I was thinking Deputy Lord Mayor, and really I just looked straight to you.
It happens.
The real Deputy Lord Mayor, stand up.
Thank you. The things we've put up with. So again, my question relates to the question raised during public question time, and thanks, Marilyn, for bringing this to the table. So I have a question. I think I have two questions. The first one's definitely a question. The second one I'm going to have to make into a question. Have we approached Prospect Primary and for that matter, Nailsworth Primary School to discuss the closure of the closing off of those playgrounds a couple of years ago, which I think in the past we might have considered as part of our disbursement of playgrounds through the council area. So the question is, have we approached either the school or Department of Education to discuss the opportunity to, in some way, shape or form, open up accessibility to those playgrounds after hours and on weekends under certain circumstances?
Yes, is the answer. I'm not sure CEO can add more to that.
Well, through you, Chair, to any director who can add more to that.
Through the chair, in my nearly 3 years here at Prospect, I'm not aware of us approaching. So it might have happened shortly after they were closed, but not to my knowledge in the last 3 years at least have we approached Department of Education.
Certainly did before when they first closed it off. I'm aware Councillor Groot's been on the governing council and tells me he's raised this issue a number of times with the school to not give us the results we want. But so there has been quite a lot of discourse over it, but officially it sounds like we haven't written for over 3 years.
Okay. So the second question, this is where I'm going to have to think carefully about trying to make this into a question.
Please.
So I'm going to start with a statement and have a question. So I think we're quite well served for playgrounds, but I do take on board the point made during public question time that having some type of play equipment in a CBD area would be unique. I was just trying to think of if that exists somewhere else. And I don't frequent playgrounds that much by myself anymore, or at all, actually, for a number of years.
The question
there is. Okay, so in our review of, say, Barker Gardens, did we ever consider the southern end of Barker Gardens, adjacent the apartment that's being built there? Did we ever consider activating that space in a way which might incorporate play equipment?
Thank you. CEO, I think the director probably has some insight into this from
Through
the park
you,
strategy.
Chair. Yes, the director.
Through the chair, whether the open space strategy does identify potential to locate a play space in Barker Gardens. From memory, I don't remember where it is in terms of delivery, but it does identify that as a potential play space area.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Well, that's all of my questions.
Well done. Any further questions without notice?
Thank you. Just a brief one, just again on the concept of the parks. In terms of the Ratley Reserve, can I just check with the appropriate director, is that fully complete at this point? Is there any other works that is going to happen in that park?
I'd take that through you, Chair, to the
Director.
Through the chair, depending on the success rate of the seeding, we may, once it gets a little bit warmer, put some instant lawn down to repair the damaged lawn. Depending on how the plants go, we might replace the plants, but essentially the equipment is in and the park furniture is established.
Just a secondary question on that. Is the artwork on the fences complete?
Director? I presume.
I use that term loosely.
Through the chair, I'll take that on advisement and get back to you if that's okay. Thank you.
I guess because it looks incomplete.
Yeah.
It's like outlines, not infill. We'll get an answer on notice on that. Councillor Rick.
My question in terms of following on from Ratley Park is just to check where the pictures used on social media, the actual complete pictures of the park. Because from what I saw in pictures, there were still cones up and different things, so it didn't look like it was actually the complete pictures. So can I just check if they were the complete images?
And through you, Chair, to the director.
Through the chair, yes, they were complete pictures. There was bunting up in those photos.
Okay.
Segregating the recently seeded area, keep people off that. Depending on success, gets a bit warmer, we bring some turf down.
Okay.
But they were complete photos.
Okay.
Thank you. And perhaps a question from me about the same reserve. CEO, Director, have you aware of the sentiment around the results? Have you given that any consideration as to what we might have missed or what we could do to supplement what's been done so far?
Through the chair, we're still putting together results. Yes, we've received a bit of negative feedback on Facebook. We have received some positive feedback from residents as well. So we're just still compiling that feedback at the moment, and we'll investigate what we can do to supplement if required.
Thank you. Councillor Grigg.
Sorry if I may, just on the back of that, if I can ask through the Mayor, will a report come back to us on that feedback and any subsequent actions?
CEO?
Again, sorry, Chair, just to the
Don't
director.
be sorry.
Yes,
We've got expert people here.
Yes.
We'll go straight to the
yes,
Revenue Reserve
I
expert.
suspect a report will be coming back. That's
Through the chair, if we require additional funds, we'll definitely bring a report back. So we don't have any funds in this year's budget to do any further work. As the CEO said, I suspect as a result of the consultation, a report may come back, I guess.
So Chair, just to
Thank you.
make that clear, we will bring a report back. It may or may not have a financial implication.
Thank you.
Further question when you're relevant.
Sorry, Councillor Rip.
Have we just, by any chance, a question through the chair to chair or relevant director? If we've had a look at the breakdown of the feedback online and in terms of residents versus sort of non-residents at all, because obviously I saw the Facebook posts and some of the comments, but I'd be clear to know, and I think it's actually really important data to know as well, because if it's a whole lot of comments from people that live way outside the area, then I'm less concerned. If it's all residents, then I'm a little bit more. So I'd like to know if we've had a look at the breakdown of that.
Are you raising a question with the whole construct of social media worldwide, or just this particular
That particular post, yeah, that particular.
Yeah, are we aware of who the respondents actually live here?
I don't believe so, Chair, and I'm getting a shaking head from the director.
So it could be from Kazakhstan or Mozambique.
Ferry houses. Ferry houses.
Ferry houses, yeah. Thank you. Any further questions without notice? If not, great, thank you. We'll move on to reports for decision. We have a number. Item 10.1, the Local Heritage Transition Development Plan Amendment Update and Submission of Statement of Intent from the SPDPC. Enough. Recommendations on page 3. Somebody wish to move it in its current form? Councillor Barnett, do you wish to speak to it?
Not at this stage. Just encourage people to vote for it.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Backer, do you wish to speak to it?
Just briefly, look, I commend the report and I'm very pleased to see the visual representation. I think that's really important. And I think there's some really significant items that have been put forward for local heritage listeners.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Pearce.
Just to follow up on that, I think it's a great report, particularly the photographs, I think, which gives you a really good picture of what we're doing. There's some great history there. So, great report.
Further debate? Well, hang on, we'll get to you if you need to sum up, Councillor Barnett. Just from the chair, I have asked the staff where the communications plan was, and they said, well, there it is. I thought, oh, it's a bit underwhelming. So I hope there's going to be more work done on what that looks like, what the letters look like, what they say and not say, because some people can be really spooked by the thought of their property being heritage listed, but of course the letter can speak to the extent of the listing, which of course is just what you can see from the street, nothing inside, nothing out the back. It can talk to the heritage grant program that we've got to help them maintain that premises. It can talk about broader heritage advice that's available, and it can talk about the integrity of the zone that they're in, because all these are, they relate to a particular precinct. So I think there's a lot that can be done, and I hope that staff work up those letters and think carefully about the contents of them and kind of test them to alleviate anxiety and actually build a sense of anticipation rather than the opposite. So that was my comment, but I agree with Councillor Pearce and that the report's really well done. A lot of consideration go into it, and also point out that this is, if you have a look at the chart of the steps involved in achieving a local heritage listing, for those of you familiar with heritage listings, it is ridiculously convoluted, and all we're doing in this stage is proving that we have places worthy of the Minister agreeing for us to start a process to get them listed. This is not the end of the process. So there's an enormous amount of work that councils have to do to get to the starting gate, which I think is terribly frustrating when you look at the state heritage process where a single person can put in a 6-page form, and the State Heritage Branch can agree that should be investigated, and off they go and they do the investigation. The local heritage process, which is a lower ranking process, has a far more convoluted and costly process around it. So just so you're aware, this is just the start. It is certainly not the end of the process. I think there were some further speakers. Is there not? If not,
I just had a question.
brief question, given that you've spoken as seconder.
Just in relation to that notifying residents, something like frequently asked questions. Can I still develop my property? Yes, you can. Da, 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 da. So just a bit of reassurance would be.
A suggestion?
Yeah.
That was a question, as if that suggestion could be incorporated.
That be incorporated.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor. Yes, I think so. If there's no further debate, Councillor Barnett, do you wish to sum up?
Yes, certainly. Yes, again, I think congratulations to the staff, and I think also I'd like to acknowledge Councillor De Bacca's about the inclusion of the updated photographs, because some we were just looking at the front fence, which was perhaps not all that necessarily inviting heritage-wise. So I think there's, Prospect Council, we've been quite strong in trying to lead the pack a bit in this sort of area, and to make sure that our local heritage does matter. It's in our features in our strategic plan, and hopefully will continue to feature. And also I had hopes that the letters that would go out, unlike some time before when we were doing this, and there was quite a lot of disquiet was raised in certain quarters about they were given information by somebody outside council that they wouldn't be able to do a lot of all the things that we know they can do in regard if it's a local heritage listing. So I hope that we really do go, full bear or into those letters and as been described before, and make it very, very, very positive and encouraging, and the frequently asked questions would be good, I think, to succinctly explain about these matters and about the devaluing of property, and a whole lot about the furphies that we know can lead to that. So, yes, so hopefully we can keep up the strong approach, and particularly with the new minister involved as well.
Okay, thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.2, Housing Diversity and Desirable Neighbourhood Study. Study update and draft report from the SPDPC. Recommendations on page 11. Somebody happy to move it in its current form? Mr. Backer, do you wish to speak to it?
Look, if you haven't already done so, I'd encourage you to have a good look at the study. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in it was some of the alternative housing options, the missing middle, so ancillary dwellings and laneway dwellings. There's a really good report in there by Dr. Damien Madigan, who's done some excellent work, and in many ways, Prospect could be pioneering in this area. So we've got, apartment buildings in Churchill Road, Prospect Road, around the area, and we've also got a lot of, 2-for-1s going up. And this might be an opportunity to do some different housing stock, given everything with COVID-19 and, the view on care homes and things like that. What I would be really encouraging of is some more sort of universal design principles. So if we do go down that path, we can make some really good accessible housing. So I'd commend the report and what's proposed, and to support the motion.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Barnett, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I'll provide Councillor De Bacca's very good comments. I think it's, again, how do we be an encourager of changing and having housing diversity that still suits our area, particularly the heritage sort of aspect. And so, yeah, I think it's more through our, there was quite extensive surveying and community consultation on all this. And I think that helped to sort of help to people to understand that just if you're talking about affordable housing, that it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you're going to have a whole lot of housing issues and things like that. So, and also about the what things could look like if they're architecturally done. So I think it's very important that, and I think that we're addressing about the design and that sort of aspect of it. So I think we've done very well in this, and hopefully the state government and others will recognise that we have really gone out and try and be a bit more of a pioneer, and some of that you need courage to do that. So I think we've been doing that. I hope we will continue to do that.
Thank you. Any further debate? Just from the chair, I'm really pleased that at the back of the document, that's the set by separate cover at page 331. For those of you who got there, there are the design guidelines that have been developed by the staff. They're really pictorial. That's good feedback from the committee to say you've got to be able to demonstrate to the applicants what we think is good and what we think is bad. I think we've been pretty brave. We staff have been pretty brave. We if we vote for it, but they have proposed things that get a tick and things that get a cross. And putting things with a cross on them is always pretty tricky, because some people might be embarrassed about saying, I now tell you what ugly looks like. Well, they've done it. I think it's very helpful, because I think it tells the story to an applicant in a lot faster way than trying to describe it in words, which is what development plans are, of course, fraught with. I'm really pleased that in there's a picture of a house at 18 Arthur Street that I'm very, very, very familiar with, and it gets a tick, thankfully. So that's good. I don't own any of the ones, or never owned any of the ones that have got a cross against them. So I just want to say that. But I think the tool is a really useful tool. If this does get endorsed tonight, it enables the staff to have those discussions, real examples in our city, and good logic around it. And I agree. I think it's cutting edge work in what we all thought was a fairly simple task. Just have properties that new applications that fit within the street and address the character. But once you go past that glib statement, it's actually really complicated trying to work out, well, what do you mean by that? And I think the report does a great job. And I think the design guidelines try and distill that into a very easy to understand document. So commendations, CEO, to you and the team for the work, and I commend the motion to you. Any further debate? Councillor De Backer, if you have any need to sum up.
Yeah, just concurring with all the comments, and I'm just on the communication. I think it would be really good if some of the body of this work was communicated to our local building community. I know we've got networks throughout the city of Prospect and beyond. So like I said, it's a very useful tool, as the Mayor pointed out, and hopefully we can start using it as soon as possible, really, to communicate, I guess, some of the outcomes of what we consulted with our community.
Suggestion. Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? It is carried unanimously. Good suggestion, CEO, with a number of local designers. We've got it. We could offer them separately packaged packs of crackers and 4 slices of cheese. Attempt them. Item 10.3, section 221 application for 60 Belford Avenue, Prospect. Noting that Councillor Pearce has declared a conflict of interest for this item. Is there somebody happy to move the recommendation on page 22 as it's presented to us? Sorry, there's a typo that's been corrected, and there are some additional words on the end. So I should have pointed that out. That add words "and community consultation," which reflects general support. I'm advised by the staff that the section 221 does not require consultation because it's a road issue, and this doesn't trigger the threshold. but our request for outdoor dining does trigger our other threshold for consultation. So they've put it sensibly in the same motion. Okay, so somebody happy to move that way?
Look, having that included, because I note that I think the Councillor Pearce has the perceived conflict and Councillor Nguyen isn't. I'll move it to get it on the floor. And the reason I wasn't going to do that if those words actually weren't included, I think that's a really, really important that community consultation, particularly for the residents along there, is considered, particularly with the loss of the couple of parking bays, and to see if there's that general interest and to see if that move to that outdoor dining is going to impact on them. Well, I'm supportive in principle of it, but I believe that community consultation is really important. So I'm happy with the way that's worded.
I will second it. Councillor Backer, do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I will. Look, I'll stand for this one. Look, I'm really supportive of this. I think we've seen throughout the city where we've got activation, that word, seeded, be it, your Maratis or Coffee Baron or whatever, these loved places, this activation, it's actually all about passive surveillance. One of the things that's been challenging down Devonport Terrace Way and in and around Charles Kane Reserve is getting people to use that area safely. So we'd love to have more people using the train stations, and you only generally do that if you've got people around. So I lived in Japan for many years, felt safe all the time because there's always people everywhere. So I think I know this is an outdoor dining concept, and I'm very encouraging of going to consultation, because consultation always makes the decision better, hearing what the community has to say. I acknowledge the challenges against parking in the area as well. So one of the things I actually asked staff, I hadn't heard back, and I might ask through the chair, is precinct-wide parking plans. Now, I did see in the development applications today, an application for another cafe in the precinct. There's a lot more developments going up in the precinct. And I guess just that, as part of the Devonport Terrace development, are there going to be opportunities for maybe extra parks, or can we use signage to turn the parks around a bit more often? So I guess I'm hoping that when this comes back, that we're going to have some of that. The other thing that's really, I suppose, important about this as well is that I guess a lot of people are going to say, well, could we use a temporary solution to see how it goes, like a, parklet that you can buy off the shelf and you plug it in and whatever. There's accessibility issues. Now, we have already got a raised traffic control device, and I would actually question, because I think the development and the traffic control device might have happened at different times. I'm not quite sure. But I have issue with the current parking that's there, because you've actually got the raised area, then you've got a kind of divot where it goes back to the gutter. And what tends to happen is the camber is such that when a big vehicle, it's actually tipping on the footpath. So it's actually, if you happen to be standing or queuing up for a bagel, it's not great. So I actually don't have too much of an issue of the loss of car parks for that activation. So I think it's a real benefit for the area. However, what I would like to see come back when we do get the consultation is the precinct-wide parking plan with what's happening with Devonport Terrace. So look, this is just for consultation, so I'd be really encouraging supporting this motion, and when it actually comes back, having a look at some of the implications and if there's any cost implications as well.
Thank you. And recognise that Councillor Pearce has declared a conflict but wish to be heard. Do you wish to speak at this point?
Sure, yeah. Well, firstly, I'm a big fan of the business, Frankly Bagels, and of any business in the prospect that goes well. There are a couple of things wrong with the report. On page 24, it mentions there are 4 residential properties with direct frontages. Well, there's actually there's 8, so I'm not quite sure where that's come from. And then you have the 5-storey apartment complex incorporating 20 apartments, and all of their visitor parking is on the street. There's no parking within the apartments for visitor parking. So the correct thing is there is currently 8 car parks on the street. Many of the residents in the apartments and in the other 8 residential properties have multiple vehicles that currently park on the street. You have visitors that park on the street. The cafe staff, there's normally 4 staff there, they park on the street. Delivery vans park on the street. And then lastly, you've got the customers. So it's busy all the time, and to the detriment of losing 2 car parks, it just doesn't wash, I don't think. Later on, we've got 10.8 on the agenda on page 104. It actually talks about maximising on-street parking. So it's really a contradiction of this report. On page 25, they mentioned there's been no parking assessment or survey done by the applicant. The quote is there, may have an effect on visitor parking. That's a gross understatement. It would have a massive impact. They mentioned that there's parking along Davenport Terrace. Now, the busiest time for the cafe is weekends. And there was always sport played on Cane Reserve on Saturdays and Sundays. And Davenport Terrace and Elizabeth Street are at capacity all those times. So there's no available parking there for weekends. The actual development on 60 Belford Avenue was a boundary-to-boundary application, approved for a boundary-to-boundary. Now, they're requesting now approximately 2.1 by 12.7 encroachment, which is 27 square metres of extra land they're requesting. And it smacks of similar application back in February 2019 when Wilcox, who was a similar, same developer as it turns out, on Barker Gardens wanting to have decking, which we refused. As I said, I'm a big fan of the business, and I think a suitable option would be for the verge that's there, which they put grass in, it's all dead now. And I've talked to the owners there that if that was paved, it would allow tables and chairs for outdoor seating without having to encroach onto our land. And also many patrons use the Oval. They get their food and their coffees and they go across and use Cane Reserve. So I think there's adequate options without having to have a loss of 2 car parks and the 27 square metres encroachment. That's about it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further debate? Councillor Green.
Can I just start with a question? I just want to check the logic of recommendation 2, which is that we endorse in principle the construction of the parklet, subject to detailed design and community consultation which reflects general support. So what happens if community consultation does not reflect general support, and what does general support actually mean?
Okay. See, well, basically, if we didn't feel that the general support was there, we'd bring it back to council. Really, if the design seemed efficacious and the community was supportive, we wouldn't feel the need to bring it back if this body tonight supported it. But if there was any suggestion that the design was not appropriate or there wasn't general support, we'd be obliged to bring it back.
So quite often we will have the consultation first to help make a decision and then work out whether we want to support or not based on that community consultation. So look, overall, I'm broadly in support of it, although hearing some of the issues around the parking, I presume without having to move an amendment, that community consultation will pick up on the parking issue. I'll say that as a comment, but if that's not the case, I'd be happy to include that as an amendment in recommendation 2. So maybe I'll ask that as a question. Will the community consultation pick up the issue of parking, or is it just about the design elements of parking?
Well, I assume so. Yeah, it'll go to the immediate residents, the residents of the. So it goes within the circle of the actual location, doesn't it? Within 60 metres or whatever the determination is. So they're all the people that use the parking. So I presume they'll raise that issue. I'm not sure how else you would deal with the parking other than ask that question or get a traffic report. But I would assume the local residents would give as good as a traffic report would give, just less scientifically. See, have I got that right?
You've got it right, Chair. Because this is about removing parking, the central issue for consultation would be about that.
My other question is just in relation to ongoing maintenance of the parklet, because while I'm very, very supportive of it, businesses do come and go, and they sometimes put in infrastructure that may not be used later on. And so in the drawings, as I understand it, there is plantings around the parklet. Is that likely to become a council responsibility to maintain and water, or is that the responsibility of the business owner?
So through you, Chair, to the director.
Through the Chair, it would be solely the responsibility of the cafe owner. If they left and it closed down, for example, we would most probably remove the vegetation and revert it back to something that's a lot easier to maintain.
And my last question is, I presume all costs are being borne by the cafe owner.
For you, Chair, correctly.
So look, I'm supportive. I'm tossing up in my mind whether I want to see the consultation before I make a final decision, but on the basis of I would want to see good general support for it from the community. But I trust the administration that they will do what they need to do. So I'll support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I'll preface saying look, I'm supportive of the current business or any other business that might be in there, but I do have concerns about the taking the parking away. I do have concerns about a whole lot of anticipated cost concerning this, even though it said the building owners so assuming there's no cost involved to council, but nevertheless, I'm just wondering whether it would be simply better to have a temporary parklet with suitable safety provisions that are outlined in the report on the verge area, which is currently dirt at the moment, and trial it before going to all this to the expense that's happening. I don't know what the effects will be of removing the raised plateau, whether it's still, I mean, that was done quite some years ago, whether that's still suitable now with the changes that have gone on there. I do notice down there that there are parks across the road where some people park. I'm not sure if the staff park over there as well. And other parks around the corner in Devonport Terrace. As we know, with the electrification, Devonport Terrace is going to have works all being done around there. So I think it needs a whole lot more consideration before we actually have a plan. I'm not happy about approving the plan that's currently in there, as I'd just like to give it a temporary parklet and just see what happens first. I think we could put in some, or if the property owner is willing to put in more benches across the road on council's verge there. And where does it fit in with the Charles Kane Reserve strategic planning? Because we've got other things that are planned around that sort of area as well. So I guess I'd like to have, when I go there, I just phone my order in and go and pick it up. And then on. But there have been times there when it has been a bit tricky to find a park. Also, that part by the railway line, what happens when the railway crossing, we know that we get a whole lot of traffic there and about the peak hours, morning and evening as well. So there has been no traffic study done, which I think it requires. So although I'm generally supportive in principle of the construction of parklet for outdoor dining there, but not as presented currently in attachment 1. So I don't know if there's possibly bill an amendment coming on, just satisfy those. And also the concerns that's been raised by another councillor about the parking, the situation.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor. No, sorry. Deputy Mayor.
So this feels like one of those things which you'd naturally support, but once you dig into it and consider it from a few different angles, it raises a lot of questions. And at this point in time, I don't think that I could support an in-principle agreement because there's been a lot of great points raised around the table. This is a bit of a unique scenario. Doesn't come our way very often. And we don't have the answers to a lot of these questions right now. So I'm not quite sure why doesn't feel like we would typically give in principle support pending what we've called to approve the application subject to guidance and community consultation with reflection on support. So it seems like we're jumping the gun a little bit. There's a lot that we, I think, need to know before we could really consider this and consider the approval. A couple of specific points. With the coming out onto the road, trying to think of a smarter way of putting that. Is there enough space on that road left for two cars to pass side by side, or is it always going to be a situation where there's going to be a standoff in a congested area? And that's something which I'm sure there's an answer to that somewhere lurking around.
Ask that question. Is that
I'll ask that question. Yeah. So is that asked enough? I'd have to ask it again.
I'm assuming from the chair that there's traffic that passes each way when there's cars parked where the parking would go. So yeah, I think the simple answer is yes, but I'll refer to the staff CEO if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you,
Get that
Chair.
confirmed, Director.
Chair, yes, two cars will be easily able to pass the proposed park when it comes out to where a parked car would be anyway. So that
Yeah, it's wide enough for that. Yeah.
okay.
And I know that page 26 is just an artist's impression, but I can see some problems with with what will happen with stalls and seating and those kind of things encroaching on what should be a thoroughfare. So the concept of wheelchairs getting through there and gophers and people riding along on bikes because it's a busy road. Again, that could create some discord amongst patrons and people, exercising their right to walk along there. So that's a concern, and it feels like I don't think it's the same situation as what, in my opinion, is what Councillor Pearce raised, because we were being asked to give away park space over there. I actually supported that idea, but it didn't get up on that particular occasion. But it feels like someone can say, I've got enough money to buy this space, which is part of the public realm, and we're strongly considering allowing them to do that. I still, in the back of my mind, think that I would support it ultimately, but I'd feel more comfortable supporting it if we'd done the consultation process and we had answers to the questions that we're all thinking about. So at the moment, I'd be probably not supporting it as it stands, but Councillor Ripp's summary might change my mind. Who knows?
Thank you. Just from the chairs, I think everyone who can speak has spoken. I think. I can ask a couple of questions. The first is that the report from Future Urban allocates bollards to it in accordance with DIPTI's requirements for bollards. But I'm not sure, we don't have requirements for bollards, do we, in that setback? Because there's an awful lot of the design is chewed up with bollards and setbacks for garden beds, and you end up with about 5 seats left. And I kind of think, well, what can you do that on the existing strip available next to the footpath? You'd easily get 5 seats there. Director, do we require bollards if someone decides to set up a curbside dining area, as they have in numerous locations around the city?
May I refer to the manager?
Sorry, CEO, I just went straight to the director. Now he's flicked me to.
Through the chair, we don't require bollards in that situation, particularly that is a 40-kilometre-an-hour zone. So bollards are not essential. That's a simple answer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was my suspicion. And so in terms of seating capacity, it seems to me there could be a really easy answer which doesn't trouble too many people. The other question I've got through you, CEO, is have we had a discussion with the proprietors about formalising the Charles Kane space as part of our upgrade, that they make equivalent contribution to doing something on that space, or even just put furniture on there that they take away every night? Have we had that discussion with?
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure, Director.
Through the chair, no, we haven't had that conversation. As part of the Charles Kane upgrade, we were already going to provide more seating along that along that frontage, both for passive and also to watch sport. So as part of our last plan, we were going to put more furniture.
Okay, thank you. And probably just concluding, it looks like there's, I mean, we're resolved by the floor what happens to it, but it seems to me that they are unique in the circumstances that they actually have several options that are already being exercised by people. And it might be that we can get a really good outcome here at less expense to them and provide them greater seating capacity, because it's kind of unlimited across the road. In fact, that's what I've observed, is people sitting down on the park and all sorts of places, which I think is fantastic. I'll be interested to see what the membership resolves to do, but I suspect that there's a number of alternatives that could be suggested to the proprietor should this not get up. And that's all from me. And I think that's all from everybody, except to sum up, Councillor Rip, if you wish to.
Yeah. Just briefly, look, I would encourage, thank everyone for their comments and contributions. Simply to sum up, I would encourage you to support the recommendations. It's in principle support going out for community consultation. If the community wants it, great. We'll make it happen. If they don't want it, we'll know about it and it'll be brought back to us. So, you know, I'll encourage you to support it and then listen to what the community says.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour?
I was going to ask if it could be done parts.
Sorry, I will. Yes, thank you, Councillor. You must have read my note because I had got it down here to take in parts, because part one is, of course, fairly easy. So we'll take it in parts. All those in favour of part one? Against part one? That's carried unanimously, noting that Councillor Pearce is not participating in the voting.
Am I allowed to ask a question about an amendment, or is that all that ship sailed? Or
yes, that ship has sailed, left the port, and reached the edge of the flat Earth. Yeah, because we're in the middle of voting.
Oh.
Yeah. All those in favour of part?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for checking. I like that sort of a sense of accountability.
My inadequacy.
Yeah. Can I do it publicly or what?
I think you can do it publicly, yeah, and we'll be having a chat about that later.
You can pay me out about it later. All those in favour of part two? 2, 3. All those against part two? Okay, part two is carried. All right, thank you for that discussion, and no doubt lots more to discuss with that item. We have another one, unusually, another section 221 application at item 10.4, recommendations on page 37. Is somebody happy to move it in its current form? Deputy Mayor.
To quote Councillor Rip, I'd like to move it to get it onto the floor. This is a same but different scenario.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry.
Very rude of me. There are some additional words in part 4, which I have recommended we include to tie the concession on the compensation payable to the provision of all of the works on attachments 9 to 13, which is mentioned in part 2, but for perfect clarity, that the deal with the staff are suggesting is that you don't pay for 2 trees, but you've got to do all the work in compensation. Just to make that, it's just clarifying what was not perfectly clear before. Sorry, Deputy Mayor. I think that's what you moved, because that's on the screen.
Yes, I did anticipate that. Happy to move what's on the screen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so this is an interesting one, and it kind of responds to what we'd like people to do, but it also throws up some issues at the same time. It's a fairly significant development, as we know, so there's already going to be some concern from the public about it. And it might well set a precedence. I think that people will look at what happens here. There are already some similar examples, but it will set a precedence for what seems to be okay and supported by council, and what doesn't, and what isn't supported. So that's my thoughts at the moment. I'm interested to hear what the thoughts of the other elected members are around the table on this motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rip.
I'll quote the current deputy mayor. Just to deputy Lord Mayor, second it to get it on the floor. I mean, want to hear everyone's views, and yeah, we'll see if there's a leadership spill on the deputy mayor at a later stage. You never know. But
foreshadowing.
But no, look, second it to get on the floor. I'm happy to hear what other people think as well.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Grigg.
As the former Deputy Lord Mayor,
Goodness.
no, look, I've got some concerns about this. So I'm happy to start off by saying I'm not going to be supporting the motion tonight. But I do thank council staff for bringing this to us, because I think what it's doing is highlighting another issue that was probably in an unknown when we started talking about development on Prospect Road, which is we have the potential to have great verandas and no trees along our footpaths. And if you look at some of the photos in the report, it really shows how that can play out. So there are a couple of issues in here, and I'll go back to information quoted in the paper. On page 42, the preferred approach is to achieve a continuous awning that still achieves requirements for height above the footpath, but is low enough and offset enough from the curb to allow the canopy of a tree. And I think that's the key issue for me. How do we have a canopy, which is good, and I support the canopy, but also making sure we've got trees that can grow. Otherwise, we're not going to have trees that are going to grow. We're going to have 1.5 metre twigs that will provide no shade. And if we're a council that is serious about greening Prospect, we're not going to achieve it through this means. The other point I want to make was around the maintenance, and I'm really concerned about this, and this goes to my question earlier on another matter around where infrastructure is put in, particularly around greening or garden beds, if it's not maintained by the developer. And the developers come and go, they'll come and do a job and then they're going to disappear, and then it's not the developer's responsibility, and they'll say, well, we did our job, not up to us. And the body corporate might say, well, we haven't got money for that, we're not going to do it. So it's going to be left to council. So we also inherit a maintenance liability. And again, on the bottom of page 44, there is a line there talking about council's ability to recoup costs for maintenance and irrigation. The development strata no longer undertook maintenance. But my point being, if the strata isn't doing the maintenance because they can't afford it, we're probably not going to recoup anything from them anyway. So it's a bit of a circular argument around that. I'm also interested in this concept of, in recommendation 4, talking about the 2 trees in Pulsford Road, which I will never support removing trees as a general principle. I think it's a real shame. That being said, those trees do encroach on private land. So there is a requirement that they would be pruned to that point anyway, which may deem them not able to stay. But to actually offset costs of trees in lieu of landscape works, can I check, are those landscape works required because of the development? Because obviously this is a property that's not too far from where I walk most days, and I don't see anything significantly wrong with footpath or street amenity. So if there was an argument to say we're going to rip up the pavement and we'll replace it, and we're not going to pay for the trees because we're replacing the pavement that we ripped up as developers, that logic doesn't ring true to me. So can I ask a question around what streetscape works they're talking about in particular, if I may?
I'm happy to kick off. They're proposing a substantial upgrade to match the rest of the village heart, so not just paving. They're talking the concrete garden beds, fully planted and irrigated. So a significant upgrade from what's there now, and using the themes that we've used. The drawings, I'm sorry, I might flip to you, CEO, and you maybe to staff about the design they're offering, which is in the papers on pages 54 and 55 in particular. CEO, whether there's anything else I've missed.
Through you, Chair. That's to the Director. It's all there, Director.
Thank you. So in essence, there's much more than simply replacing the paving that they may well damage on the way through. They might not.
Yeah. So my point being, we're not asking for that streetscape upgrade to happen. We're not going to budget for it anyway. It's not a cost we would incur, but we incur the cost by lieu of not having them reimburse us for the $30,000 worth of trees. That's just a statement. So, look, I can't support it on the basis that we are slowly eroding the capacity for trees to grow unless there is a design element within the canopy that allows that to happen. And I can't see that in this. Now, if it isn't here, I'd absolutely support it, but I can't see it. And in fact, the pictures dictate quite the opposite. So while I can probably live with the 2 trees in Pulsford going because they are larger in private property anyway, and that's life, I can't live with the fact that we're not going to have trees along our premier strip, part of our village heart. There's a $30,000 cost that we're effectively incurring in terms of the streetscape upgrade, and we're going to have, as I said, 1.5 metre twigs that will never grow. So I can't support it as it is. I would also ask if we can take it in parts.
Happy to take it in parts. I'm just, see, are we able to clarify the canopy interface with the trees and any drawings? One of your staff able to help us with that?
Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, there are currently 2 jacarandas on Prospect Road. They're proposing another 3. At this stage, we haven't got clarification about how the trees and the awning will interact with each other. That would be part of the detailed design that we're asking them for them to design it, not us. We spend a bit of time discussing ourselves and we realise that it's not up to us to design it, it's up to the developer to do that. So they haven't provided information yet, but that would be asked of them is how they interact. Discuss could the awning go in around each tree. It's because there are 5 trees. It'd virtually be like an S all the way through. I'm not sure that would work. But again, it's up to the developer to come back with us to prove to us that it can work.
So if I can just, further in your answer, part 3 specifically asks us, should we vote for this, to endorse in principle an encroachment for the awnings, subject to the design for the awnings ensuring existing and proposed street trees can achieve healthy tree canopy development. So it appears to be captured within part 3 that if we vote for that, the staff are then under instruction to only improve an encroachment that allows for those trees to be healthy and grow. That's how you've written that up for us, isn't it? Yeah. So we don't have a canopy design per se before us at all. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. I couldn't see it either. But
Yeah. I'm not sure if I still got the floor or not, but I'll presume.
Yes.
So again, this is a little bit like the previous item where we're being asked to approve something on the basis of something that's going to happen after we approve it. And not that I don't have total faith in the administration, because I do, and I'll put that on the table that I do. But I'd much prefer to see a canopy design that satisfies my curiosity around tree growth before I approve it, or before I would endorse it as one vote around the table. So I still maintain I won't support it. I'd be happy to support something that comes back that shows me the ability for the canopy and the tree to live harmoniously together, but not at this point.
Thank you. Further debate. Councillor De Backer.
Look, I think in principle, getting people that are doing developments to think about the public realm is really important. And look, with that stretch of road along Prospect Road, it's very narrow, and it's not as if we can even do the WUSUDs, is that the right thing? Because we've got the bike lane. As the great ones they're doing in that little stretch as we go up to North Adelaide, they've lit it all for us and they're planting trees for us. Entrance to Prospect, wonderful. However, I'm just looking on the Pulsford Road side. Again, we don't see any activation. If we look along this east part of Prospect Road, it's almost like the exposed path of shame. You don't ever walk there in a 38-degree day because you get no relief at all. So all the dining is actually on this side. So we're planting trees, and I think it's great to have jacarandas. They haven't shown a section of how that would work. If we saw a section, say where the awning is, or even a model, 3D model, how that could work. And the other thing that maybe a question, in the removal of the trees, when does that happen, and how can we be assured that the other part's going to happen? We've seen this a lot. So, knocking over old post offices or trees of this development that's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. So I'd really like to tie any removal with the construction or the last part. So those trees will stay there until the very last. Then we talk about this. So I'm just not sure why it's happening at this point, or maybe I've missed it in the report. So I'd be more inclined to support it when we've actually got some more detailed plans.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Barnett.
On the strength that I felt inclined to improve it because it would upgrade that part of Prospect Road complementary to the existing. It would actually include more greening. And in the report, it was said that they prune the trees like out of Viet Lam Or That's a similar thing with the canopy that's come out and out. So there's most probably ways and means that this can all be managed. But on the other hand, it's similar like with the first one, the previous one that came to us. That on that, we're going to go out to consultation, and I just hope that all the things we've been talking about will be included in that. And on the other hand, we've got this one, which seems, all cut and dried, except we apparently, some of us want to know more about the plan for the where the new trees are going. So to me, it's sort of a bit, betwixt and between the previous one and this one. I'm just struggling with actually, if we endorsing in principle, but then we're part 4, we're actually endorsing the removal, and then part 5, we're endorsing the planting. So none of it's really conditional to in principle agreement.
It needs to be in principle for part 4.
Are you suggesting an amendment, Councillor?
Well, if we're going to be consistent to parts 2 and 3, well then parts 4 and 5 should be endorsing in principle, and the removal endorsing the part 5 planting. I don't know, if there's anything else underneath that. That's all we've got, right? So I guess I can move that.
As
It's so simple and should always just be incorporated.
yes, because we have capacity within the body of the attendees tonight to be able to get a seconder, but I'll do what I usually do, which is ask the mover and seconder if they'll incorporate, provided, that's usually amender. What are you seeking to do? It sounds like upgrade part 4 and 5 to tie in more with parts 2 and 3. Is that correct?
Well, it was to add the wording at part 4, council endorses in principle the removal, blah, blah. Then part 5, council endorses addition wording in principle of the planting, blah, blah, blah. And is that time and authorises administration? Well, again, it should be an in principle. Principle authorised administration.
I'll just take advice from the CEO, because just to get this nice and clear, because his staff will have to enact it. So if you don't mind, Councillor.
So if we put in principle in both paragraphs, it's some reason for us to have the support. But so the difference in principle and subject to the above at part 4, would that be stronger? No, it would have to be stronger, wouldn't it?
Part 5,
yeah,
part 3.
Yeah, sure.
So Councillor, part 4, because it involves removal of trees, it might be council in principle and subject to the above.
Yes.
Endorses the removal of 2 trees. Part 5, because they're offering to plant new trees, is not necessarily a subject to, but that could just be an in principle.
Yes.
But then it's your amendment, so I'm just sought some advice for you.
No, that makes sense to me.
No, subject to the above. Okay.
So just for clarity, the above what? Which bit of the above?
You can name the parts 2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Parts 2 and 3. And part 5, just add the words in principle after council endorses.
And I think the principle is LE. Yes. Just above the.
Yes, keep the schools out of it. Yeah. Okay. Councillor, is that what you're seeking to amend? Did you wish to speak any further to it before I ask the mover and seconder?
No, I think that helps to tidy up the whole thing together. So I'm happy with
Okay, happy. I'm asked to move and second to incorporate. Deputy Mayor, are you happy to incorporate the change?
Oh, I can only say yes or no, can't
Apart from that statement, yes.
I? Then no.
No, okay, then it becomes an amendment. If there's a seconder, do we have a seconder?
I've seconded the original motion. Can I second the amendment or not?
No.
Okay.
It leaves only Councillor Pearce.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Pearce. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Pearce? And Councillor Barnett has already deemed to have spoken to it. Do we have any further debate on the amendment?
Question?
Yes. Question, Deputy Mayor.
It talks about 2 replacement trees on Pulsford Road, but there's one missing. I just wanted to clarify through the chair that there is actually going to be a replacement tree. So on page 56, there are 3 noted, and the existing trees are to be removed and replaced with Acer, however you say that. But there is a 3rd stump currently on Pulsford Road. Is that going to be replaced at our cost and not forgotten as part of the, I don't know why it's missing?
Director.
I think it needs to be part of this resolution, but I'll
Should I? Yeah, because I'm just wondering if we need to capture that there's a 3rd one that will be ours.
Well, all I can see is that we're being asked to consider in part 5 trees, 2 replacements and 3 additional trees. Is that any further to that question? Do you wish to speak to the amendment? No?
Question, sorry.
So, Deputy Mayor, come to your question.
Without wanting to say in principle I support the amendment, but I don't support the whole thing that we're being asked to vote on, and I think the amendment is taking it a little bit further away from where I'm comfortable. We're being asked to support something that we really have no idea. Well, we have some idea, but there's again a lack of clarity with what we're being asked to support, and someone else will be making the decision. If we don't decide around the table, someone else or a group of people will be making that decision for us, but we're supporting something that we're not in control of the outcome of. So that makes me uncomfortable, and that was the only reason I didn't support the amendment. And I mentioned before, I don't think I'll be supporting a fair few parts of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Ripp?
Yeah, it does say on page 36 that if council determines that it's not satisfied or is satisfied or basically only satisfied with part of it, the applicant would need to then prepare an amended plans for further consideration. So the question into that, if we support in principle part 2, but then don't support part 4 and part 5, will that then mean that the applicant, we will support the application in principle, but the applicant will then have to submit amended plans with, I guess, then the council wanting the trees to be retained?
CEO.
So I can repeat that if you need me to.
Yeah, sorry. Could you, Councillor?
So if we support, say, for example, part 2, basically in principle of the changes, and part 3, but don't support part 4 and 5, my understanding is we can do that because obviously it's taken in parts. We can do that. Will that then be sent to the applicant to come up with modified plans?
CEO.
So as I understand it, the in principle, so they could encroach, you're saying in part 2 and 3.
So part 4 basically is that we endorse removal of 2 trees and the rest, and part 5 is that we don't support 4 and 5, but say support 2 and 3. Would then the applicant need to be given the opportunity to submit amended plans? Because it does say on page 36, if council determines that it's not satisfied or is satisfied with the application in an alternative form, the applicant would then need to prepare amended plans for further consideration by SCAT. So I just want to be absolutely clear that we could support, for example, 2 and 3, not 4 and 5, and then they would have to submit amended plans.
I think that the simple answer to that is they would receive our resolution and then determine what they want to do with it.
Right.
This doesn't compel them to do anything should it get up. It merely asks us to grant them permission to build a canopy over our land. They need an encroachment, and they're offering to upgrade our footpath, and we would grant permission for that. And they're offering to plant trees. We would either give permission or not give permission. The bit you're interested in is whether they get permission to remove trees or not. Should we say no to that, we don't have a canopy design from them. So they have options, I guess, which would be to come back and put a better argument up about those trees, or to come back with a canopy design that allows those trees to stay. I think that captures the option.
That's where my thought process is around. I'm happy in principle for 2 and 3, but I'm not comfortable with 4 and 5 at the moment. That's why that's why I asked that question. So it does give them an opportunity.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Does that help with answer your question? Yeah. Councillor Grigg.
Thank you. Look, I won't support the amendments on the basis that the term in principle neither adds nor takes from the recommendation at all. There is no link for it to come back to us in the recommendations. So we can say in principle it has no other meaning other than if it wasn't there. So I don't understand the purpose of the in principle. Subject to, I guess, and that makes sense because it hooks it back to something. The term in principle doesn't hook it back to anything at all, so I won't support it. Unless I can begin it's otherwise by another speaker.
I'll give it a go in the amendment. I'm relatively comfortable with what's been put before us here. We've not had a developer come to us with a comprehensive footpath upgrade proposal. We've had plenty of developments at scale come to us with no plan at all to manage even a concrete truck turning up, and with their lack of plans completely destroyed infrastructure that we've put in place. This developer has come to us with a proposal to upgrade the footpath and upgrade it not in an arbitrary style, but upgraded it perfectly in alignment with the standards we've set down the street, which are quite high standards when you compare them with other councils. They've proposed to plant species of trees, which I no doubt there's been some negotiation over. They've proposed to keep the 2 jacarandas on Prospect Road and supplement that, so they're respectful of what infrastructure is already in place. They have asked to remove 2 trees. That's always contentious, but they're asking permission to get those 2 down, but plant 3 others. So I think that's perhaps the bit where I might be convinced by others to say, well, think harder about that. But as for the rest of it, I'm very comfortable with a developer that wants to spend their money on upgrading our infrastructure to the very high standards that we've set at their cost. That offer doesn't come along very often. And in fact, the most recent time was outside the cinema, where you might remember, those in the former council, that we established a fund where we paid 50% of that cost. Here, this developer is offering to pay 100% of the cost of doing a better job than what was done out the front of the cinema. And I think they should be commended for offering to do that. There are probably 2 parts that are of interest here. One is, can the trees survive with the canopies? Well, I think Councillor De Backer has pointed out that the canopies are important in terms of protecting any activity inside the tenancies. There's not sufficient room for outdoor dining, but there will be inboard, and so the canopies provide shade. But so part 3 says that encroachment is only going to be approved if you can prove that the canopy won't harm the tree's health in the longer term. I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with part 5, where we endorse the planting of extra trees because that's part of our green tunnel strategy. We're endorsing that ourselves and budgeting for that. Here, the developer is offering to pay for 5 trees to replace what's there, and no doubt they'll be of an advanced size by negotiation. So I think the amendment ties it all together pretty well. I think part 4 being subject to is a very strong sense of connection to the items above. I support the amendment, and if I need to speak further to the basic motion with or without the amendment, I'll do so, but I think you can clearly see the intent I've got. So I encourage you to support the amendment, to tie it together, and furthermore the basic motion. So I think it's a good deal. So that's the end of my offering on the amendment. Councillor De Backer, you haven't spoken to it. I have asked a question. So you wish to speak to it?
I've got another question, and then I might speak to it.
Sure.
So I'm just looking at page 59 of 178, which is the first floor. So you've got apartments 108 through to 105. So are what we're talking about, which is the encroachment, basically the balcony. So this is not a flexible awning that would be, designed as a separate entity. So if I'm looking at the hard edges of those balconies, no one's going to let a jacaranda grow into their balcony. This is what I'm thinking, which is maybe why we're not getting a section.
Sorry, your specific question is which page number?
So this is page 59 of 178, which is a floor plan, which appears to be the first floor plan, which is above the courtyard area. So I'm just
Got it.
trying to lay one over the other, which doesn't seem to where the
So I think your question was, is that the canopy design?
yes.
My understanding is no. They're not asking for an encroachment of apartments over the footpath, only a canopy, and the canopy is below and not shown in that drawing, is my understanding, because the canopy design is not concluded yet. The second part of it, is that correct? From a nod from the Director for Planning and for Infrastructure. Second part of your question was, would somebody allow Jack Renner to grow into their balcony? Well, I presume they might have some thoughts about that. However, this proposal is suggesting to plant 3 extra trees, not to have less trees. So they clearly have thought about that themselves and made a decision that they believe the trees should grow. Now, all I can do is offer that. It's not really a technical answer, but you can prune a tree on your balcony. I suppose you could ask us to get up there and prune. Does that answer your question? There were two parts.
Without a section, it's quite difficult to read.
I think in essence, your question, the canopy is not shown on this drawing. Yeah.
Can I ask a brief question? And I've spoken.
Brief question, Councillor.
In your speech, Mayor, you mentioned that the streetscape upgrade will be done at no cost to council. However, we are foregoing $20,000. Do we know the value of the streetscape upgrade?
I don't have a dollar figure on that. CEO, Director.
Chair, no, I'm not aware, sorry.
Sorry, through you, Chair, have we got a ballpark estimate, Director, for that kind of work?
Sorry.
Or would it be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars?
It would probably, through the chair, not be hundreds, it'd be up close, be tens and tens of thousands of dollars.
So there's a net benefit to council, is my
Absolutely is my short answer to that. The work outside the cinema, which did include an intersection, but really just changing the paving intersection, was $300,000. The work we're doing in the plaza is north of that. The work on the main street, where we did 2 blocks, was $1.5 million nearly 10 years ago. I would suggest that this detail of work, including the forecourt, which is open to the public, would be closer to 200 than 100,000 with the quality of materials they're suggesting to use. But it is a guess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Certainly more than, yes, absolutely, yes. So any further speakers to the amendment? There's been lots of questions, but not everybody has spoken. I'll take it that there's not. There's no summing up on an amendment. So I now close debate on the amendment and now put the amendment to you, as is on the screen, to change part 4 and 5 as we've discussed.
Parts was, isn't it? We're taking in parts. I thought someone called for. No, that used to be.
I've agreed to take the motion in parts. Are you seeking to also take the amendment in parts?
Well, I think it's the two. I think, I would like, if possible, to have the amendment.
Happy to take the amendment in parts. All those in favour of part 4? 1, 2, 3. Casting vote, that is carried. All those in favour of part 5?
Did you get a no vote?
Sorry?
You didn't get a no vote.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'll go back to take part 4 again. Thank you. All those in favour of part 4? And all those against part 4?
Just for due process.
I will now put a casting vote in favour of part 4. All those in favour of, and so it is carried. All those in favour of part 5? Is all those against part 5? Those are casting vote in favour of part 5, and it's therefore carried. And that now becomes the motion and is incorporated into parts 1 to 5, which I've agreed to take in parts. Is there any further debate on the motion? There aren't very many people left to speak, and in fact, I think it was only Councillor Pearce who seconded the amendment and then for us deemed to have spoken. So I think unless there's some questions, I'll wrap and go straight to Deputy Mayor if you wish to sum up.
Thank you. So I support the sentiment around this adding value and helping us do our job, and the developers have certainly put a lot of effort into getting it to this point, and they've thought about it from every angle except for one point that seems quite critical to us, and that is how's it all going to work together. And I just wish that they had worked that part out as part of this whole motion coming to us, because then it would have been very clear. We probably would have been eating cheese and biscuits by now already, because we probably would have may have all approved the motion. So that's my concern, not with the whole uplift of the area. And I understand more trees rather than less trees. I understand quality materials. I understand the benefit this will have for that section of Prospect Road. But it's very hard to, again, to be asked to approve something in principle when it feels like those things could have been resolved. And to me, it feels like in the previous motion, the consultation may have been done, then brought to us for a decision in full knowledge of what we were going to be approving. And that's the concern I've got. And I don't really know why we're being forced into that situation, 2 motions in a row of supporting things in principle, when we're the ones who have to explain, not in 6 months, but in 12 months' time or 18 months' time, when people talk about the fact that we've built a canyon. I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but lack of trees, which is what we're all about in every other part of the city. But for whatever reason, those trees haven't worked and they haven't been maintained, and someone's got out there from their balcony and leaned over and sort of chopped them off because it's obscuring their view of the sunset. Sunset, that'd be right, yeah. I guess my hesitation here is more so not so much about the concept, but about the fact that it's been brought to us. At this point in time, I don't know whether this type of thing could be brought to us as part of a workshop as they occur. To me, that'd be a good use of our time and a great discussion to be had with the developers invited along. And then it could help us form an opinion which we could use the next time this happens, and the next time this happens, and the next time this happens. But we haven't had that opportunity to do that. So it is, I think that the vote might be against me, but on that basis, and only on the basis that I don't really know what in principle means in this situation, I won't be voting for the motion. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes debate. I just take it in parts. All those in favour of part 1? All those against? Just for the sake of good process, carried unanimously. Part 2, all those in favour of part 2? 3, 4, all those in favour of part 2? All those against part 2? Part 2 is carried. All those in favour of part 3? All those against part 3? It's tied. I cast a vote in favour of part 3, therefore it's carried. Division on a part. All those in favour of... I'm going to always forget how to...
It doesn't happen to go along, I'm sorry.
All those against part 3, if you please stand and have your names recorded. Effectively a new vote. So the affirmative are those who remain seated. It's still tied. I still cast a vote in favour of the affirmative, and it's still therefore carried. Thank you. But the names are recorded. All those in favour of part 4?
Sorry, can I just see part 4 on the screen,
that
please?
would be good if we could.
Sorry, pull the part 4 as it was amended, and now is the motion. Now is the recommendation, so and the motion. Yeah. All those in favour of part 4? All those against part 4? It is tied. Cast a vote in favour of part 4, and therefore it's carried. Take the division as a new vote. All those against part 4, please stand. And take it that those seated are in favour. It's still a tied vote, and I still cast my vote in the affirmative, so it's therefore carried. All those in favour of part 5? All those against part 5?
Sorry, can we just scroll it up? So
Yeah.
That's fair.
Sorry, although there's, oops. Right, cursor stop. There is part 5. All those in favour of, that's very distracting, Jazz. All those in favour of part 5? Against part 5? It is carried. Division, all those against part 5, if you can please stand. It is a new vote, so you don't have to maintain your vote, of course. And I take it that those seated are in favour, and it is still carried. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. And we'll move on now. Lots there for the staff. Item 10.5, the Green Adelaide Water Sustainability Grant 2020-2021 grant for Resilient East was SUD implementation. Recommendations on page 75 to 76. Is somebody happy to move it in its current form? Or Councillor Groot first. Do you wish to speak to it?
I just have one question. Do we have an existing council policy that requires funding agreements, particularly fairly small ones, to come to council for approval?
CEO.
My understanding is that we've got to bring every grant application to council now, even those that aren't matched.
Thank you. It's a fairly small grant. I thought well within the CEO's delegation.
Apologies, Director, have I got that right?
Through the chair, that is correct. The all grant has to come to council. But at the last meeting, there was a recommendation, a resolution of council that we will look at reviewing if there's a grant that does not require council contribution, financial contribution, the administration is to review that policy. So that particular policy will go to the audit committee where the original policy went to for review.
But for the moment, through your chair, yes, we have to.
Thank you. No, I support the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnett.
Yes, so essentially $30,000 grant for tree inlets, permeable footpaths and rain gardens. I think we get some value for money that council collects on behalf of the levy for the Green Adelaide region. One of the few times we actually get a benefit. I think I encourage people to support it. It's in with our strategic plan about greening and sustainability and that. So I encourage everybody to support it.
Thank you. Further debate? Councillor Groot, do you wish to sum up?
No.
That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Is carried unanimously. Item 10.6, school consultation results, traffic management around schools, recommendations on page 87, 88. Councillor Groot, you happy to move it?
Yeah, look, I would like to move this one. So the original motion came from me, as I recall it. This is a significant ongoing issue, I think, for all schools in the City of Prospect, and one that there is no simple answer to. My involvement has been much closer with the Prospect Primary School rather than the others. But I just want to particularly call out a big thanks to our traffic engineer. I think his name is Jacob, for the work that he's been doing. He's had very good response back, particularly from Prospect Primary School, and I think has managed to unravel a couple of options that we weren't able to get to, or the school wasn't able to get to in the past. So I just want to pass on my public thanks to Jacob and the team for doing that. I think the other issue, the other point I just want to make in the report, I'm just trying to find it, I don't think I'm going to be able to find it quickly, is that traffic is not an issue just for SAPOL. It's not just an issue for council. It's not just an issue for the schools. And we had this debate when we were meeting in Nailsworth Hall. I remember it quite specifically. It's got to be an issue that we all tackle together. And I think this is a great example of how that is being tackled together. So I just want to thank the Director through the Chair for the report, bringing it back to us. I think there's still lots we can do. I think there's more that we have to do. I really like, for example, what Blackfriars have done in their staff car park and having a kiss and drop zone. I think those sort of things are showing a bit of innovation, and it'd be great to see some of our public schools doing that as well. So I just want to support the motion, support the staff who and also for the work that's been happening practically out there on the ground. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Again, it was remiss of me not to point out exactly what you just said, that schools are included in part 2.
I had seen that before I started speaking, and I was talking to the amended motion.
It's not amended. It's
sorry, the altered motion.
Altered recommendation. It is your motion. And excellent, thank you. Councillor Barnett, wish to second it?
Yes, I'd just like to endorse Councillor Groot's comments, and I just had a feeling that this sort of has pulled a whole lot of issues across our region together concerning this. And I think when it's all, it's not just like one school in isolation with another school and so forth. So I think this has been a very good strategy to do this, and I think we've seen the good results. And so I just hope it continues. And
Thank you. Further debate, Councillor De Backer.
Yeah, just a few comments. I just express my disappointment in probably what is a small percentage of the caregivers, I guess, or parents or whoever's dropping off their kids. In some, setting a really bad example, in front of the school community, blocking driveways and, inappropriate U-turns, and it does put people in danger, especially our young people. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm really concerned. Recent incidents with our inspectors and how we're managing that into the future, because it's obviously not being a deterrent. I'm not sure how the schools, can manage it as a deterrent. And certainly I know in other council areas, they use smart technology for parking, and that takes the person out of it. And maybe that's sort of something that we could look at as a trial. We do have infrastructure in and around schools, whether it be cameras or monitors or things like that. And it could be trialled maybe as a state first in and around a school. So I know there's a lot of perceived frustration that councils aren't doing enough, but it is a collective problem, and I think we've all got to work together. So if there's any way we can actually use technology perhaps to say, look, this is you on camera doing this is not okay, and this is the fine, it might sort of hold people to account and not direct it at our staff. So some comments there.
Thank you. Further debate, Councillor Rip.
Yeah, just a comment first and then a question. Obviously, the parking issues around Nailsworth Primary School have been pretty prevalent to me in terms of people raising that in the community. What I'd like to know, obviously the report was heavy at the meeting, issues were raising, parents this, parents this, parents this. What I'd like to know is what are the school doing to actually help in that process in terms of managing the parking? Because, it's all well and good that it's obviously there's a lot of issues and, people are clearly doing the wrong thing. But equally, I'd like to know what the school are doing to actually help with their part in managing that. I've been to also plenty of different schools to observe parking, and I see some schools really good. They have traffic marshals out there. They'll have 8, 9 staff out there managing it. So I just want to know particularly how the school are taking part in that process, if the staff are aware.
See ya. Councillor, it's a mixed bag. Some schools are outstanding, others aren't. We're meeting with schools. Obviously, our traffic engineer has met. There are 4 schools and 2 kindergartens, all at the same time who have people arriving. We're a small team. We simply are not the answer to have yellow, there's this, there, and we're not the enemy either. It really, your question's spot on, because it actually really relates to the responsibility of schools to take an active part. Some are doing better than others, and we're just working through that.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor?
Yeah, I think that's an important part of it, because clearly if it's not a deterrent enough, and we can't obviously, without limited to resources in that traffic space, we can't be at every school every 5 seconds as well. So I think schools also need to take an active, and it's their duty of care, I think, to take a really active part in this process as well as people doing the right thing.
Thank you. Further debate? Just a question from the chair. Is there any intention to repeat this process as thorough as it has been regularly, such as before the start of the school year or soon after? Because I know we've done this several times over the years, and every time there's a lift in school responsibility, there's a lift in behaviour, and there's no complaints for a long time after we do it. And if we don't do it, it starts to get well out of hand. So the question is there any intention to make this a regular part of the traffic management engagement?
Yes.
Great answer.
Sorry, was that too brief? Chair?
Well, I could ask what frequency, but I'm sure you'll work that out. Because that could mean every 10 years. And I'd hope it's more often than that.
It will be quite as you know, we're meeting shortly with one of the schools. I don't think this is something that's going to go away. I think we'll have to be on it. And so, yes, Chair, we'll be doing it pretty regularly.
Excellent. Any further speakers to the motion? Not. Councillor Group, do you wish to sum up?
I do actually. There's just a couple of comments I want to respond to. The first is the comment about schools' responsibility in the issue of parking. And had I been more astute and read the amendment on the recommendation 2, I might have suggested that the words after the word schools might be a comma, SAPOL, comma, council, comma, DIPTI, which is consistent with our previous resolution of council. So we are on record as saying that. However, that's not on the recommendation, so I can't move that. But I think the issue about schools managing traffic is a really interesting one because educators are not traffic wardens. They are not equipped to deal with traffic. I've seen educators in the high-vis vests out there dealing with schools, and they are getting the same abuse as our traffic inspectors are without the resource our traffic inspectors have. With that, they don't wear body cameras. They have no authority. They're simply trying to make sure it's safe for students. So I think, and Councillor Rip, I'm no doubt in about 5 years you're going to learn all about this, that the school environment is a school environment. They're educated. It's like asking us to go out and be traffic wardens during the renovation of Vine Street Plaza. We're not equipped to do it. We're not skilled to do it. It's not our job. And I would say the same thing for schools. It's not their job to be out there marshalling traffic. So I just made that point. Other than that, I support the motion. Thank you again for the work.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 10.7, 40 km/h speed limit, City of Port Adelaide, Enfield impact recommendations on page 96. Somebody happy to move it in its current form? Councillor Groot, do you wish to speak to it?
Just very briefly, it's good to see we are inching, albeit slowly, towards a 40 km/h speed limit. It's been a long, long process. I would like to acknowledge the hard work of the City of Port Adelaide Enfield in both supporting our motion in their council area, which is fantastic, and certainly supporting our motion of 40 km speed an hour speed limits in the area north of Regency Road. It's great to see their support on that. So I would certainly support the motion as it's written, support the advice that we'll provide back to the City of Port Adelaide Enfield, and hope that this will inch us, as I said, a little closer, maybe at a speed higher than 40 kilometres an hour to get this resolved.
You do have a seconder. Councillor Pearce, do you wish to speak to it?
I'll just a question actually. They're not in agreement with the area to the north of Regency Road, but they intend to have a meeting in October 2020 to look at the 40k zone in their area. So I'm just wondering if that does happen, will they revert to including that area?
CEO?
It may or may not happen, Councillor, but we're asking that this council proceed anyway.
Yeah, we are, yeah. They're not in agreement with it, but
no. But we're saying in any event we note their disagreement.
Yep.
But we're recommending.
So they'll probably come back and agree if they do 40 as we have, I presume.
I would hope so.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything further, Councillor?
No.
Any further debate?
A question on that line. Will their sort of not willingness to support that component in any way, shape or form put at risk our proposal for our area? I wouldn't think so, but I just wanted to check.
For you, Chair, no, that's not our understanding. We have supported both local MPs.
That being said, just in the back of that question, the final determination is by the minister, isn't it? And the boundaries that the minister chooses.
And by the
yeah.
They
may choose a different boundary to what we've asked for.
Indeed.
And if they do that, would that then come back for our application? Because obviously we've put up that we want it going 40 kilometres wide, obviously less a couple of roads. If they put up a boundary to say we'll approve only say half of it, would we then have to come back and make a different recommendation?
CEO?
So the chair's correct. At the end of the day, it is the minister's call. I would be, we would be surprised, given the council's support, given both local MPs' support, that they would simply carve out a number of streets that are part of our council and cut them out. It's possible. I think, through the chair, it's highly unlikely. Or we would hope so.
We have a new minister too, so that might delay matters, might not. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I support the motion and its parts. I think I've just personally read into Part C that they may not wish to preempt their own sort of community consultation process or meeting. So that's just my reading into that.
Okay, thank you. Any further speakers to this motion? There being none, Councillor Groot, do you wish to sum up?
Look, just to encourage people to support the motion, always happy to have a conversation about boundary reform if boundaries become an issue around 40 km/h zone. Happy to be an advocate for that at any time, but we'll support the motion. Sorry, I missed that.
I'm just pointing to the camera, which is now on me because I'm speaking, that it was you saying that.
Oh, I thought I was supporting your motion there.
Oh, nice one. That concludes debate on this matter. All those in favour? Against? It is carried unanimously. Item 10.8, driveway crossover policy, recommendations of page 104 and 105. And so I'm happy to move it in its current form.
I'll do so to get it on the floor, and I did have a question as well.
At the back, yep, question.
Yes, we had so on the page 107, it says achieve a minimum clearance from council street trees. Removal of street trees is not permitted unless extenuating circumstances. It's got a few things that said extenuating circumstances, but I can't find in the policy what extenuating circumstances are and how that's decided. So, so even with the crossover, it sort of says you've got a maximum amount, but then there are extenuating circumstances for having a double. Is that correct? Am I reading it?
So,
was it just a removal of trees?
So as I understand your question, that phrase is referred to in the report,
Yes.
but not in the policy. We're being asked to endorse the policy.
Right. Okay.
Do you want me to ask how staff would interpret extenuating circumstances?
Yes.
Your will, CEO?
Yes, through the chair to the director and the manager, acting manager.
Yeah, through the chair. With the policy, we wanted to be fairly clear that our base position would be no double driveways, no tree removals, but we do recognise that there may be a chance that there's maybe someone needs a particular disability car or there's some rare occurrence. So that's why we put in the report that possibly there could be an extenuating circumstance, but the onus would be on the applicant to really justify why, because we didn't want to put in the policy saying we won't approve double driveways unless X, Y, Z. Otherwise, we'd get a whole lot of people applying saying, I've got X, Y, and Z, and we'd just be constantly fighting that battle. So this does give some opportunities that if there's a really extreme case, they could put a proposal through to us, and that would have to be approved by the director. But our base position is no trees out, no double driveways.
Which I think is fantastic. But sorry.
Finished. Thank you, Councillor.
Yep. Which I think is fantastic, but I guess I just want to be reassured that extenuating circumstances is my adult kids have moved back and they need to get to work by 6:30, so we'd like to put in a double driveway. Or whatever the extenuating circumstances might be, or them up the road, they've already got a double driveway, why can't I have one? So I just, I'm really glad it's a strong policy, because I think the impact is huge if you've got a subdivision and you've got 2 double driveways. You lose the opportunity to achieve the green tunnel that we're trying to achieve. And not just that, talking about parking before, you lose the opportunity for on-street parking. So I think I'd be really encouraging everyone to support the policy. So I think it sort of says, yes, we support green tunnel, we support, maintaining on-street parking where possible. And if you can design your house in such a way that it doesn't look like a double carport, and it can do a V, so there's still opportunities to park 2 cars, not look like a double driveway or a double verge. And this came out strongly, certainly in the housing diversity and review, that our community really value that public realm space as a place that can be planted. So I'd encourage you to support the motion.
You, do you have a seconder? Councillor Barnett, you wish to speak to it?
Yes, just certainly backing up Councillor Backus' comments about, I think it's been quite a clear move by this council that this is the way that we want to go. We want to encourage more greening of our city. We've been losing more and more of it due to planning decisions and whatever. So I very strongly support this.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Group.
No one mentioned the word Lord, Deputy Mayor. I too raised some concerns with the use of the term extenuating circumstances. I acknowledge the principle behind why we wouldn't list reasons, but I'm interested in the process, and I'm glad that it's not. I don't know. It just feels like it opens up an avenue for people to exploit. So I don't know what the process is for approving something under extenuating circumstances. Whether it needs to pass 4 or 5 tests before it would ever be considered, and if it didn't pass any of those tests, then regardless of how much someone jumped up and down, it wouldn't be considered. I don't know whether we've got that type of mindset as to how we would assess and rate an extenuating circumstance. Maybe I could ask the director if we do have a plan or a principle behind testing that.
So can I just add to the question, perhaps for the CEO? If we set a policy, the good representative, democratically elected folk of Prospect, and someone wants to go against that policy, how do you determine an outcome?
Through you, Chair, we would regard the use of the term extenuating in this policy context as an exceptional situation. So extenuating isn't, it's convenient, it would have to be exceptional. I think the acting manager mentioned things like a child with a severe disability and a vehicle had to get in. It would have to be that level of exceptional circumstance. Extenuating isn't convenience, it's not taste, it's not any of those things. It would have to be in the same category as exceptional. And it would be the sort of thing that administration would say, if we had brought it to the members, they would go, oh, well, gee, those are exceptional circumstances and those, But the acting managers put it very, very well. Basically, we support healthy trees. They won't be taken out unless there are exceptional circumstances. And so that's the context of the policy, for example.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, still, I'm not sure the difference between exceptional and extenuating. And it almost needs to almost reference that as a case of last resort. I don't know whether we could broadly mention the types of things which health-related rationale would be considered. Other things won't be considered. I don't know whether it's too late to make that change, but I just have a concern with opening up something which could come back to become a little bit subjective over time. So yeah, I just wanted to express that concern.
Thank you. Before we go to the next speaker, can I just ask for clarity again? There's a report. We've been asked to endorse a policy. Does a policy in any section mention extenuating or exclusive or really highly justified or in any way allow deviation to be considered from the policy? Does it, in any place, does it say that?
Chair, no.
No. So the policy is black and white. Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Look, I'll be supporting the motion, although I am somewhat at times conflicted by the issue of whether we should allow double crossovers or not. I think there are some circumstances where we should, but I think the value in not doing it outweighs that. I did just have a question about the maximum width of a driveway is 4.5 metres. I'm not an engineer, in case you hadn't guessed, but I'm just, what is the average width? Thank you. That's how big they are when you catch them. I just want to understand the average width of a single carpool or a single driveway, because 4.5, because I'm thinking 3 metres or thereabouts. 4.5 seems a little bit longer. I'm quite comfortable with that because that does provide a bit more escape for the V-shaped double carpool, because this does not restrict people creating double carports or double driveways to the crossover, I presume. So you can still have a double driveway to the crossover. So 4.5 would allow that bit of extra moving space. But is an average, maybe through the Mayor, is the average, or what is the average width of a single driveway?
CEO? Through you, Chair, to the Acting Manager.
Oh, all right.
Through the Chair. So the minimum, I believe, is for the internal dimensions for like a carport to be 2.7 metres, because your average car, say in the Belford Avenue example, the parking space would be 2.1 metres wide. So we worked on that. If you've got 2.1 metres wide, that allows for that's still essentially kind of 2 cars that could be parked in that driveway and come out. So there should be ample space still to have a double garage and be able to still get out.
So through the Chair, is the answer 2.1?
Well,
on average, I'm not just on average, not.
Well, yeah. So the average would be 3 for the actual carport itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then the car 2.1 would be. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just supplement that question with, what is our standard crossover width? This is the break in the curb. Someone asks for a new crossover. What's our standard off the rack contractor go and make a crossover of this width? Do we have such a standard? No.
Through the Chair, yeah. So would that be, you're talking about the invert in the curb? The
ramp in the curb?
Yes, that will be 4.5 metres as well. So in some other councils, they allow for a flare to come out 0.5 metre or 1 metre to allow you to reverse out on an angle. But then again, that just makes it wider and wider. So we've got the gap in the curb will be 4.5 metres as well for the invert consistency.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor.
No, thank you. No, that's useful. So look, I'm quite comfortable with the 4.5. I think it does provide that little bit of flexibility, because people will still build houses with a double driveway and a double carport. I don't think this is going to stop them doing that, as is their right under our development plan to do so. So I'm supportive of the motion and supportive of the 4.5 metre crossover.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Rick?
Just a question, just to clarify, particularly the new planning laws coming in, whatever date they do. So this policy would meet all of the requirements for us under our development plan, and would it also meet the requirements with the new? There's no issues with the new planning laws with this policy at all.
CEO? Yeah, through you, Chair, to the Director of Planning. Director.
Thanks for the question. Through the Chair, the simple answer is the planning side of it only gets from the property boundary to the house.
Mm-hmm.
What this is dealing with is from the property boundary to the curb. So planning approval could have a 7 metre wide driveway, for example, that then hits the property boundary at 7. It then immediately needs to come down to the 4.5 or 3 or around that mark with a single crossover. So in terms of, I guess, in a roundabout way, the question is, are the planning rules or the planning changes relevant? Not so much, in that they can be dealt with from within the property boundary. A standard rule of thumb that the staff are already applying is to encourage narrower or the narrowing of the driveway based on a known elected member sentiment around the narrow crossovers. This policy then allows for those two to line up.
I'm happy to support it. I think it's a great idea. And I guess just a further question I have, to avoid the examples where someone puts up an application and they say, well, down the road on the street, you've got a double driveway, and you're now telling me you can't. Have we legally looked at the policy to make sure that that will stand up, particularly for future challenges? Because I'm happy with the policy, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to get into a situation where a resident's going to say, well, on my same road, down the road, we've got a double driveway, why can't I have one? So we've got that those aspects covered as well.
That'd never happen. CEO.
I was going to say through you, Chair, to the Director, but precedent shouldn't be an issue. We've got a clear policy. We'll apply the policy. If we had to apply historical precedent, would be in all kinds of problems.
Yeah, so it's fine. Okay.
That was under yesterday's policy. This is today's policy.
Yeah. Okay.
Retrospectivity.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Pearce.
I'm in support of the recommendation, and just wanted to point out that this is the conflict I had before, that we're saying here that we want to maximise on-street parking. So some members didn't approve that before. Thank you.
Any further debate? Revisiting or any other? No? Okay. That concludes debate. Sorry, apart from Councillor DeBacker, and wish to sum up.
Yeah, look, I mean, I actually think the maximum width of 4.5 is a double driveway in effect. But what I'm reassured is that if there are street trees, then they're protected. My concern is where we have neglected areas, sometimes to the east, sometimes to the north, that have no existing street trees. They can just build the full 4.5, which is in effect a double driveway. So I'm just concerned we haven't planted out the areas we're already intending to with the green tunnel already, or they're already cut down and buried with AstroTurf, that people could just come along and do that. So I guess I would have preferred to see something less than 4.5. Yeah. So in effect, we are voting for a double driveway, and I think that's disappointing. So I didn't realise that was the width that we were voting for.
Just for perfect clarity, in case the Deputy Mayor asks, just to check a fact, you can't change it now.
So maybe I won't vote for it. Yep.
Finished?
Finished.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 10.9, policy review and update of existing policy. Recommendations on page 120. Two policies. Sorry, no, there's the one policy there. Draft curbside and waste recycling policy brought back with those changes we asked for. So I'm happy to move it in its current form. Councillor Barnett, wish to speak to it?
Yes, we just, within all of that, we've got mention of our 1 by 8 litre kitchen organics basket to be supplied. I do remember Councillor DeBacker at some other stage saying about the design. So are we still going to be having the same, in my opinion, ugly design of the basket with this?
Is that a question?
Yes.
CEO, are we still going to be having the same ugly design? You heard the question.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair. Refer to the Director, because I'm actually not sure that we're doing those. Are we still handing those out?
The Chair, yes. If the public wish, they can get a kitchen caddy, the same design. At this stage, we have no intentions to change the design.
Let's ask a supplementary question. Have we got a stock of 10,000 of them, or do we just order small batches according to demand? In other words, could we, if there was another design, could we change sort of option?
I really don't know. I'm sorry, through the Chair. I'll have to find that out.
You're right on top of this issue, Director.
It's a biggie. Through you, Chair, my understanding is we would, as councillors, buy these things in bulk through places like Eastwoods. That's my understanding.
Well, it'd be good if you could perhaps clarify.
It out.
Yeah,
Yep.
let us know.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Barnett.
That's all.
You do have a seconder? Councillor Groot, you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, look, I will. Just briefly, a couple of questions. I'm not sure we've still quite nailed the 10 bins out the front issue yet, but I will support this to get this approved tonight. But our policy does still talk about no more than 10 bins at a time. That means on every week when there's 2 bins coming out, that's 5 bins of each type. And where we have small areas, because we have lots of trees on our streets now, hopefully, there's going to be even less space for bins. So I still think we should reserve some more powers to say for multi-unit developments, we need to encourage a private arrangement, even if that means that we reduce rates to compensate for the lack of waste collection. I don't think we've kind of got that right. Second question I have, that's a comment. Question I've got, under the section 7 in schools, page 128, it says council will provide the schools with 3 bin system for use as an educative tool, not as a collection option for waste needs. So can I just clarify, does that mean we give them the bins but they can't empty them?
Through you, Chair, to the Director.
Chair, sorry, can you repeat the question?
So section 7, council will provide schools with a 3 bin system to use as an educative tool, not as a collection option for all waste needs. So does that mean the schools can have some bins to look at and say, this week we have bits and pieces, but they don't collect them?
Through the Chair, that's correct.
Right. So when I was walking past a school recently, and I'll hesitate to not say which school it was, there were probably no less than about 30 bins.
They've got a lot of units there.
There might be. And I discreetly, on my morning walk, took this photo, and I can't find it quickly. But it got me thinking, because I know I, on behalf of Prospect Primary School, advocated for a recycle bin to be included for collection, which I'm grateful for council that they did that. But looking at this school in our city and seeing all those bins, I was a little surprised that there were so many. And I can only presume they're collected, either that or they're just public art, I'm not sure. So can I maybe ask that as a question? Are schools having bins collected? And if so, is that a private arrangement that they're paying for, or are we paying for that?
CEO. Through you, Chair, to the Director.
Chair, I'm happy to take that question under advice and provide a response back to the
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps with reference to our previous policy around that matter.
If you forward that photo through.
I'm sure you could have a conversation with the councillor about where that photo might have been taken.
Yes, and I'm happy not to say it publicly, but I'm happy to say it privately. I can't find it now anyway. But look, I'll support this. I still think we've got a bit of work to do around the 10 bins. I think it's just totally unworkable. I'm happy to support this motion tonight.
Thank you. Further speakers? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So just looking at page 124, the last review date, 2011, seems like a long time ago, considering the amount of discussion that goes into this topic, and then noting the next review date is 2024. So when the staff gratefully brought the concept of regular reviews of policies to us, I made a point that some policies would be required to be, but given the rate of change in certain aspects of what we do, some policies should be reviewed far more frequently than others. So I think I might have a little question here. So would a 4-year review period be considered a standard review period, or would this be a more frequent review period? Pause.
CEO.
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. I assume it really relies on the area that we're looking at. Some things aren't as dynamic as other areas. I think perhaps there is an assumption that bins being picked up wasn't as critical an issue, but your point's well taken. As we came to look at this, of course, we found that with the rise of multiple dwellings, it became a new factor. I wonder whether I can defer to the Director, Jenny, in terms of what is the regular.
Through the Chair, as a matter of principle, that each policy should be reviewed within the 4-year cycle. Should there be a certain policy that requires review due to legislative changes, we do bring it back to Council a lot earlier than the 4-year cycle. That is one of the key conditions. However, if there's any policies that changes that affects a certain policy, it will be brought back to this Council earlier than the 4-year cycle.
So thanks for the answer, Director. That makes sense when it relates to legislative changes, but to your point, CEO, the dynamic nature of what happens here could be legislative, but it could be what's best practice in a year and a half's time or 2 years' time might be significantly different. So I don't know whether this is the right forum to suggest that this is a policy which might come back to us for review more frequently. I just suggested it. I don't know whether that means anything, but I did just suggest it.
Profound.
You with me still, man?
Trying.
Keep up if you can. It's a dynamic environment we're working in. Yeah, so can we look at reviewing this more frequently than 4 years? Is this the right forum to bring that up?
Question. CEO.
A great question, Deputy Mayor. We have an enormous number of policies. We're working through them as promptly as we can. We're trying to prioritise policies because of the time of council. When we have brought policies to this forum in my time, they have taken a lot of council's time, and that's great because council wants to have a good look at them. We are working through them. We try and prioritise them. The director's nodding. We'll do everything we can. 4 years is the typical cycle. If we felt anything became urgent, we'd bring it earlier. CEO?
I think you've already answering my question, but anyway, it's a good answer. Nonetheless, CEO, so thank you for that answer. Yeah, I just wanted to raise that point, and I think that's probably the end of it.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Riff?
Page 127, for obviously 5.1, where it says no more than 10 at any one point in time. Can I just get some clarification at how we came to say that set number? My overall concern with this is, and I've raised it at the last council meeting, I believe, is that I'm of the opinion that if we approve development in our area, council rate, people expect that their bins and waste is collected as part of that. And, you know, whether we as an elected body think, you know, the council rates, council rates are a collection for tax or it's a fee for service, whatever that opinion around the table is, the perception I believe in the community is people expect that if the development's approved in that area as part of their council rates, they should be able to access the basic waste collection services. So if we, first, well, I suppose I've got two questions. Question one, how did we come at the set number of 10? And the second question would be, for people that live in those multiple dwellings, if we're unable to collect their waste, would council consider entering into a rates rebate to cover that loss of service being provided?
The latter is our decision, essentially. The first part of the question, who's determined 10 is a magic number? Is it common elsewhere, or is there some reason why that number?
Through you, Chair, I don't know, and I can see the director is perplexed.
I think you should ask the director just to.
Yes, Director, can I ask you to?
Chair, I don't know the magic why that it's a magic number of number 10. Sorry.
So in terms of the definitive number, Councillor Barnett is actually doing the motion. It's like, how many is reasonable for the community to expect to have bins cheek by jowl on a footpath outside a property, and how many can you fit on a property that has a driveway as well? And I think 10 is not an unreasonable number. It's not really an answer. If we want to have a comparative with other councils, then I guess we could ask for it. But the act of asking multi-unit residences to have a different collection system is commonplace. So there is a line at which you say you must or you don't need to, and the staff are recommending 10. So we don't appear to have a rationale for why 10, not 9 or 11. But, yeah. Sorry, Councillor, that's a bit of a three-part answer. Is there anything further you wanted to ask or?
Not at this point.
Right. Okay, thank you. Councillor Pearce?
Well, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be part of the development application? Like, if it's greater than 10, it would go back to the where it says on page 122 that there'd be a management plan, waste management plan in place. So it's not to the detriment of the larger development. That would be part of the application.
If I take that as a question, the answer is absolutely yes. They are told Oh, sorry, Joe, if you go, can you run through the process around that answering that question?
Certainly, and through the chair, a multi-unit apartment application is with the planning team. This is well before it gets in the realm of waste management policy. It sits under the Development Act and with the planning team. They have to look at the average amount of waste generated per person and then look at whether or not that average amount of waste multiplied by the number of units can then be accommodated in the council 3-bin system. If it cannot, then the planning staff require a commercial waste management approach, which the members who have sat on the CAP would see those regularly. That then becomes part of the condition of approval, and essentially just it takes it outside of that policy and gets dealt with under the Development Act, which is then reinforced or enforceable as conditions of approval.
Thank you. Did that answer that question?
Yeah, well, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Anything further? Okay. Any further debate on this item? Councillor De Backer.
Yeah. Question, comment. Councillor Ripp makes a good point about the 10. I'm actually more concerned about the obstruction of driveways or interference with trees and plantings and the ability to actually have 10. So if you were on a corner block and there are 10 units in that block and there's, for some reason, we haven't planted any trees and we haven't planted any shrubs, which might be the case, and there was plenty of room for 10, you'd say, well, you collect them. Where I think the wording would be better is if there is no space for the bins for safe egress or interfering with, landscaping or something. I think those words would be better. I'm not uncomfortable with it maybe going through and coming back to us because if there were some examples you could give me of areas where there's 10 that are not privately collected, it would be interesting to know. But certainly having sat on the CAP, the point that Councillor Ripp makes about rebates and whatever is interesting, but often there's safety issues, so you can't actually pick large quantities up peak hour. If you had to do Churchill Road between 6 and 7 in the morning, it's not going to happen. So you have to have private companies go in and get, the big bins and things like that. So I've seen how the planning system operates, and rates is a bucket, and there's other things that we have to spend money on, like parking and upgrades and footpath remediation and for higher density living. I think for the policy, it is a good start, but I think it would have been better to talk actually about the ability to put the bins. And certainly I notice the trend is, for some reason, I think it's to do with financing, that instead of getting a multi-unit block, you might get 10 individual townhouses. So each person keeps the individual bin in their garage. So I'm not going to share my bin with Mr. Jones next door. They don't have a collective bin area. So then they all go to put their bins out, and I've seen this happen on Prospect Road, and it does impede on the footpath. And I'd hope there's another policy that we can deal with that. So if we can go back to the strata and say, well, hang on a second, you're putting all your bins out, but this is actually causing a safety hazard, you would have to review your bins policy. So I'm hoping that's in existence, in which case I'm a bit more comfortable with this. So maybe as a question through the chair, is there a policy that would direct people if they're putting out bins that...
Go through you again, Chair, to the Director.
Director.
Through the Chair. I'm not sure if it's a policy per se, but we have requirements that our compliance officers will be on to enforce in terms of maintaining safe egress along the footpath. We'll be able to use. So I can't quote what that document is, but we would have that ability to be able to enforce that requirement.
And similarly, damage to plantings, because people don't seem to have a problem with putting it on the understory plantings for some reason. I don't know if that can be.
It's a question.
Yeah, policy.
Do we have a policy around asking for monies to remediate plantings damaged by bin locations.
The Chair, under the Local Government Act, we can enforce/prosecute people who damage the public realm, and then we could do it under that method. Be very hard to prove.
Yeah, well, that's exactly
So
right.
the garbage trucks put it in.
But
Yeah.
there is
Yeah, it could very well.
capacity under the Local Government Act to enforce that. Yes.
Anything further, Councillor? From the chair, these are all really good questions. This stuff's not easy. We need a policy. The policy is well out of date. I think the staff have tried to make it workable and answer the questions that were raised before, which is it retrospective? The answer was no. So the policy now says new, not retrospective. There are indeed a number of problems retrospectively which you'd love to solve, but life's not that simple. We are one of the councils that introduced a green bin. We impose upon people that they need to put out 2 bins in some weeks. So we can't sort of have this retrospective policy where they used to put out 1 Galvo bin that the dogs work out how to take the lid off once upon a time, and now they have to put out 2 bins. And if we allow them to subdivide their properties into 3 or 4 units, and now there's 8 bins, at some point you've got to say what's a reasonable policy that tries to come to a mid-ground between what's reasonable to see on the footpath and reasonably workable versus what's not. And the staff have decided that arbitrary amount is 10. There's no reason given, but I probably would have come to a similar number, and maybe we all would have if we'd been given the chance. It's not retrospective, so the other policies need to apply going back to those locations that have too many or it's disorganised. And we have had some of those complaints about people leaving their bins out in between collections. We have a policy, the old policies to deal with that, to get them to take it in. And there are, keeping clearances on the footpath, 1,200 wide, and making sure that there's no damage. All those sort of things are generally taken care of. So I'm aware of a multitude of bins being out, but I'm not aware of it being an insurmountable problem. It seems to get managed. This is about going forward, providing clarity to the planning team who are doing assessments. As something new comes in, you can say to the applicant, you can only put 10 bins out. That's 2 per dwelling. That's 5 dwellings. You want a 6th dwelling? You're going to run foul of the policy. So you better come up with an answer. And I think that's what we want, is clarity going forward. Policy gives it. I think it's a good place to be. If it comes need for me to vote for it, I'll vote for it to get it up and running. And it does deal with the issues that were raised before in terms of retrospective versus new. Notwithstanding, some of the stuff's difficult. Yeah. Okay. Any further speakers?
May I ask a brief question?
I've got you having spoken, so
Yeah.
brief question.
Just a brief question. We have a waste management bylaw which actually speaks to where the bin should be, which is on the carriageway. Is that going to be reviewed in relation to the policy? So it actually says on the carriageway, which is defined as the road,
It's supposed
which
to
is
be
not
on
even the
the
footpath.
Through you, Chair, I understand it will be used.
Thank you. Any further debate? There being none, Councillor Barnett, do you wish to sum up?
Some very good points raised. I think most of the residents' complaints I've had about them being left out, and when it's been followed up, they do get some sticker or something I've been put on the bin, or there's some small retribution. And a lot of it depends on the way the apartments are titled, as planning has discussed. I've seen that there are some residents that actually seem to be quite sensible, and they actually collect and pull their bins and have them in a particular area. So I think these are all the sorts of things that we can encourage by education. I think also lately we've been seeing that perhaps we're not compelled to put our red bin out weekly. Some seem to have a almost religious obsession, regardless of how much is in there to be collected. So unless it's your prawn shells, perhaps again through education we can encourage that. I always understood that the law was that the bins had to be collected from the verge, and they were not allowed to be on the road, the carriageway. And I still see some of that even in my street. So I think again for education, we can perhaps hopefully keep on working our way through that.
Thank you.
Thanks, start again.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Thank you. Look forward to the update on the other bits. 10.10, unreasonable complainants policy. Coming back to us in response to previous questions. Recommendations on page 134, 135. Somebody happy to move it in its current form? Councillor Groot, wish to speak to it? No. Councillor Barnett, happy to second?
Yes, I think it seemed a reasonable thing to have an unreasonable complaints policy.
Oh, best speech ever, Councillor.
In principle.
Subject to. Now it's getting out of hand.
Yes. Yes.
Any further debate? Councillor Ripp?
Yeah, look, really happy with the modifications. I think it's also addressed what my concerns previously about how council members, are part of that process. The only question I just have on page, I think it's 137 in that table, where it says determine a request unreasonable and take no further action, and it says council members are not notified at this stage, and council members may be engaged as part of the review or a review of that. What, in the event that the contact has actually come from the resident to an elected member and we've passed it on, if it's determined that we're not going to be notified, we'll have an unresolved, we will think we've got an unresolved inquiry sitting there, but the administration may have determined it to be a unreasonable thing. How are we going to be notified that no further actions are going to be taken part on that request?
CEO.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for that. So the principles always should an elected member be aware of the fact that for whatever reason we're not taking a complaint forward because it's unreasonable or from an unreasonable complainant, we will let that councillor know. What this policy wants to avoid is me simply publishing to the world that I've decided that John Smith is an unreasonable complainant, because it's defamatory and it's privacy issues. But the theme that runs through all of these is, if there's no need for you to be involved as an elected member going forward, we probably won't burden you with the fact that this person's now regarded as an unreasonable complainant. If the complaint had been brought through you, we'd let you know. Obviously, we'd have to resolve it. But I wouldn't then let every other elected member know that this person's an unreasonable complainant, because that qualified privilege doesn't cover me. There's a reason why I'd let you know. Okay. It's just quite reasonable.
That's clarified that.
John Smith's a really nice bloke.
I've heard that, yeah. So I'm just using him as an example. Chair.
Anything further, Councillor Ripp? Any further debate? That concludes. Sorry, Councillor Groot, you should sum up. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. He's not there anymore, but we did have a John Smith who lived in John's Road, I think. The guy with the windmills.
Carlo Machini. He's more known.
Sorry,
Carlo Machini.
Yes, that not at all like John Smith.
Neighbourhood Watch called him.
Yeah, well, they're around. Item 10.11, SA Waste and Food Strategy. Their response to consultation recommendations on page 149. Somebody happy to move it in its current form? I think I saw the Deputy Mayor just out of the corner of my eye first. Very brave Deputy Mayor.
Moving it to get it on the floor. Looking forward to the debate.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnett, happy to second. Wish to speak to it?
I'm happy to listen to the debate, but generally I'm happy with the strategy.
So much happiness. Is there any further debate? Councillor De Backer.
Comment question. I'd like to move an amendment. So just minor changes perhaps to the submissions to green industries.
So do you want to start with that question?
Yes. Okay. So one of the things that I would like to emphasise is the some of the resistance to food organics recycling. One of the things that I've identified is certainly the not so nice looking organics baskets, and they're fiddly and they're hard to clean, and people spend, I don't because I don't have that money and I'm not that interested, $60,000 on a kitchen, marble bench tops, built-in appliances, stainless steel. They're not going to put one of those things on the bench tops, and it's not, people see it as smelly and whatever. So it's not preaching to the converted, it's preaching to the people that have got kitchens. We just want to make it easy. It shouldn't be hard. So my thing, I've got pictures, making it stylish, so, and having a mascot that's not necessarily like your Sophie Thompson gardener kind of people, but you have your Lucy Corns or someone who's talking to it from a kitchen owner and making it easy, So it could be in the form of a competition. You could get the schools to get involved. They could do a 3D printed version. You could have an artistic version. It could be a really sort of low cost but high impact program. Now this, plant the seed and water it with Green Industries. They've got the money to run it or do it or whatever, and councils can buy in their area and communicate with their people. There's also, I was reading a piece of, bring it up. There was a document from Victoria, which was a food waste recycling social research, and it was all about the communications. So communications are much more successful when they're local. So I think if we had buy-in from our local school community, our local artistic community, you can origami your own waste basket. I mean, obviously with Pleg and the great work that they do, the Prospect Local Environment Group, but it needs to look different. So quite often the communications at the moment, and I know we try really hard in the space, it's cost us a lot of money, it's cartoon characters, it's yellow, red and green. It doesn't look like a $60,000 Carrara marble kitchen. And I'd like to sort of look at that market or other markets and actually specifically target the marketing to them. So if there's some way we can incorporate some of that sentiment in our feedback to green waste, how about a mascot who's, and the messaging looks a bit more like this and a bit more less of what you're doing. Otherwise, I don't have to move an amendment or encourage someone to write an amendment subject to minor edits. So if that can be maybe incorporated in the motion, do I have to move it formally or?
Right, I'll tell you, there's a question, yep. CEO, that says subject to minor edits. That sounds to me beyond a minor edit. But I'm open to your interpretation.
Just through you, Chair, to clarify, you'd simply, as we go back and with our submission, raise issues about the aesthetic attraction of
my thing would be, and I'd be interested to hear other comments around the floor. Quite often there is a resistance to using countertop containers because they don't look very nice and they're messy and smelly. That's the resistance. Until I got one of these, this was like $7 from Kmart, or not going to mention any names, but it's basically ceramic with a bamboo top. It's loose. I could just put the green organics thing on top. No baskets, no handles. I can just tie it up, use it every day. So until I actually got a nice looking one, I never used it. So I'm not saying I'm typical, but I did have heard other comments from other people that say they don't use it either because it doesn't look very nice.
So I think, Councillor, and just interject, you're suggesting to change or add to part 20.
Yes.
What do you see as potential barriers for encouraging further diversion of waste away from landfill? The physical appearance of the current
top containers.
Top containers, yeah. Would you accept that as a minor edit? So, yeah.
Well, we've got that noted, and we can accept that. It'll be part of the submission that we've made. Chair, I don't think it's too far away from the intent and spirit of what we're trying to achieve. But if it's really up to the council whether they regard that as a minor edit.
I think it might be just good to run it through the process so we're super clear. Yeah. And I suggest you move as an amendment, which I can test with the mover and seconder, and change, just let me get the section, the part right. It's the first one, is that right, Director? Part 2, that the food waste diversion question is related to?
Yes. Attitudes and behaviours.
Sorry, food waste is part 3. Is that correct? That barrier part 20 is in attachment 4, which is in part 2. But the title of part 3 refers to food waste. I got a bit confused trying to work out why they were different. But I'll take it that bullet point is for part 2. I'll clarify it myself in the absence of a response, because that's what refers to part 20. And can I suggest, Councillor, that you address part 2 with your proposed amendment, which may be along the lines of, as presented in attachments 1 to 5, with the addition of the words to answer 20 related to the appearance of the benchtop bin.
So communications and vision, I think it could go beyond that.
Relating to the appearance of the benchtop bin, and I'm sorry, you might want to, Councillor, you mentioned a lack of education or promotion. That is also not addressed in part 20 at the moment. You may wish to add that in your amendment.
All right. Yeah, so my apologies. 20 residents placing materials, resources placed in the wrong. Don't care. It's not my problem. Basically, it's about the targeted and addressing targeted communications.
Perhaps and a lack of suitable promotion.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Bin. Yes, sorry. Benchtop receptacle or bin.
Caddies.
Container, whatever.
Kitchen
caddy, perhaps.
Organics basket.
Benchtop kitchen caddy.
We've been calling it
Benchtop kitchen caddy is probably good because
organics basket, kitchen organics basket. We refer to ours.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for your assistance.
Now, see the indulgence in the mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor, you happy to incorporate those additional words in part 2?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Barnett? 2 yeses. No seek leave of the meeting to incorporate the change. All those in favour? Against? It's thus incorporated. Thank you. Councillor Backett, do you wish to speak any further? Any further debate?
Just want to support the additional part to point 2. I've received a lot of feedback in the community from people that go to other places to buy caddies because they think the council supplied ones are dull and again don't meet and they don't want them on display. I know people have gone to Kmart, Bunnings, quite a variety of places to get better quality ones. And I also think too that if we can get people, or we can get, I guess, the state to look at different options for better kitchen caddies, they also need to look at promoting and encouraging people and not just preaching to the converted, but also it needs to be targeted communications to get people that aren't putting their food waste to the green bin or into the kitchen caddies to do so. So it needs to be improved targeted promotion as well to totally support it.
Yep, thank you. Can I just concur with that? This is the single biggest message I give nationwide is if you want to do something better about the planet and recycling, put your food in the green bin.
Correct.
It's simple. You can do it without any caddy, without any special bag. You can do it, just put it in there. You can wrap a newspaper if you want to stop it marking the sides. You just do it. And people look at me as if I'm a nutcase. Well, I've had that before. But it is the easiest thing to do, and governments don't get the promotion of it. And when I explain to them that I'm really trying to get food waste back to farmers, they kind of light up a bit more. But the lack of promotion around it is astonishing. It's the heaviest part of our landfill collection. We get billed for it. We've seen the report saying we could save $220,000 for our ratepayers every year. That's almost a playground upgrade every year we could get if we could convince our ratepayers to be better organised with their waste. And a lot of it is about the weight of food waste in our landfill bins. It's pretty clear. So the promotion is really important, and I'd hope that we'd do more, CEO, within our own council. I know we are trying, but to do it more effectively. And it does need a really clear promotion program. So that's why I say food waste back to farmers. I think most people like farmers. You know, you ever met a farmer you didn't like? Well, who would argue with getting organic material back into the farm stream? I mean, it's hard to argue with that, but people need to be convinced, and that I think is lacking. I've never had a problem with the kitchen benchtop caddy organics basket bin thing, but my wife did go and find another one because we just changed that part of our kitchen. She didn't like the other one. I understand Councillor Tobacco's comments. I have never found it smelly. I've always found it really easy to use. I don't like the operability of the new one. I think it's clumsy and badly designed, so there is a gap in the market around it. So I'm happy to act with the changes, and I'm happy with the motion and the responses, because I think it's a message we need to get to the government. And I'm not saying because the state government are ignorant to this. They are alive to this issue. They're working pretty hard on it, hence the questions that have come to us, and I think we need to back them in. This council is an early leader on food waste into organics. We were second after City of Port Adelaide Enfield. We took a lot of flack at the time about it, but people who do it love it. And I'm not sure why other people don't. So it would be really nice to try and understand it. Commend the motion to you. Any further debate? There being none, Deputy Mayor, do you wish to sum up?
Good points. Every little bit could make a difference. I think we're looking for a lot of small changes across a wide range of things that we might activate. It still seems like we're a long way away from where we need to be. It still seems we're relying on people's cooperation and sort of feel good messaging and those kind of things like that. I think we'll get to a point in time when we might need to apply a bit more of a carrot and stick approach, and we just have to, cross that bridge when we come to it. People have had plenty of opportunities to get on board with this concept through encouragement, education, and making it as easy as possible. And our figures show that we're still a long, long way off where we should be. So, it's almost getting to the point where it's sounding extreme, but to call out illegal dumping or some other way of really forcing the point. So I guess we'll continue to discuss this and look for those opportunities to bring as much out of people's goodwill and people's commitment as we can. And then at some point in time, we might have to change tack. But happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Concludes debate. All those in favour? Against it is carried unanimously. General business, urgent business, is there any? No. Reports or information, there are 4. We'll ask someone to move them all on block unless they're withdrawn. Does anybody wish to withdraw item 12.1, the mayoral monthly activity report? No. Item 12.2, the Strategic Planning and Development Policies Committee meeting minutes, the 30th of July 2020. No. Does anybody wish to withdraw item 12.3, the Planning Reform Update August 2020 final phases? No. Does anybody wish to withdraw item 12.4, the value of LGA membership? No. All right, someone wants to move all 4 on block. Oh, wow, we haven't had this for... Councillor Barnett, do I have a seconder? Councillor Ripp, there's no debate on moving on block. All those in favour? This is carried, all of them. Great joy. Skipping ahead as fast as I can. Councillor member reports and briefings, are there any? No, that being the case, motions are noticed. Neil, questions were noticed. Neil, confidential items. Neil, item 17, all that's left for me to do is close the meeting at 10:11. Thanks, elected members. I think I just lost $5. I never put any money on it. The 9:30 seems